Chapter 1392. Before Feng Ling could speak, Li Nanheng slowly raised his hand from her shoulder and stroked her eyes. And these eyes are big and bright. They're much better than Kay's fake eyes made of equipment. Feng Ling raised her hand and was about to pull his hand down, but the man did not let go. Instead, he caressed her eyes and nodded in satisfaction. The bones around the eye sockets are also so good. Even when you grow old, you'll still be a beauty. After being teased for some reason, Feng Ling found that every time she wanted to say something seriously, she couldn't do anything to him. On the way back, Feng Ling brought Li Nanheng into the barber shop and asked someone to tidy up his hair. In the end, the trimmed length was the same as before. It was not a particularly short buzz cut, but it was not as long as a few days ago. In short, it was very energetic and good-looking. When he walked out of the barber shop wearing sunglasses, he looked no different from usual. His complexion had long recovered, except that he was slightly thinner than before. A few days ago, Feng Ling had said that Kay would probably come to visit in a few days. In the end, she was right. The day after Kay put on the prosthetic leg, he spent a day getting used to it. Then he happily left the wheelchair in a handsome suit and came with the brothers of the sniper team. At that time, Li Nanheng was sleeping in the bedroom. After taking the medicine at noon, he had to sleep for 2 hours because of the medicine. He was already used to it. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he was woken up by the laughter outside the living room. He casually tugged at his somewhat fluffy and messy hair and walked out of the bedroom while feeling the air. Originally, Tam, Lin Qing and the others were sitting in the living room chatting and laughing. When they suddenly turned around and saw Boss Li, especially since Boss Li's eyes were not bandaged, they didn't know if he could see them with his eyes open. They instinctively kept quiet. The atmosphere immediately became tense, and they didn't dare to make any noise. Feng Ling was packing up the various fruits and gifts that Tam and the others had sent over. When she heard that the living room had suddenly become silent, she poked half her head out of the kitchen to take a look. She saw that the 4 of them had changed from angry lions to obedient puppies because Boss Li had woken up. They all quickly raised their hands to their mouths and gestured for them to be quiet. Feng Ling sighed and smiled. Although Li Nanheng had left the base in name, he was still the boss in the eyes of these brothers. They immediately became obedient when they saw him. "What are you all doing? Why are you shouting?" Li Nanheng walked out with an expression as if he had just been woken up from his sleep. When Boss walked in the direction of the sofa, his steps were steady and straight. He didn't even need to raise his hand to feel around. It didn't seem like he couldn't see anything at all. Tam, Lin Qing, Kay and the others just sat there and watched in a daze. Could it be that Boss's eyes were beautiful? However, when Li Nanheng walked to the sofa, he found that Lin Qing was sitting on the coffee table and his leg was blocking his way. Li Nanheng kicked him. "Move your leg away." Lin Qing hurriedly retracted his legs in fright. Then he saw Li Nanheng slowly sit down on the sofa. He didn't look at any of them. Instead, he casually touched the sofa and touched a light blue pillow that looked like a girl's heart. He then sat there. Looking at Boss, who was no longer as thin as before, holding such a thing in his arms, the 4 of them exchanged glances. They were sure that Boss's eyes hadn't recovered yet. He probably didn't even know what this pillow looked like or what color it was. "Well, Boss, we brought Kay over to see you." Tam stood up from the sofa and patted Lei Peng and Lin Qing, who were in the way. The 3 of them sat on the coffee table, leaving only Kay and Boss to sit on the sofa. Kay also remembered that Tam had given him a look, indicating for him to sit a little closer to the side and not touch Boss. After all, he was also an injured patient. Even if Boss wanted to find fault with someone, he definitely wouldn't do anything to him. Although that was what he said, sitting on the same sofa as Boss really made him feel more pressured. Especially since his life was saved by Boss. First, Boss saved his life and then Feng Ling went to pick up their lives. "Boss, you and Feng Ling arranged for Kay's prosthetic leg, right? Just too realistic, okay? After putting it on, it doesn't look any different from before, and it's especially sturdy and flexible. Yesterday he almost went to the training ground to wrestle with us," Lin Qing said as he reached out and patted Kay's knee. "If*C, be gentle?" Kay hurriedly dodged his leg to the side in pain. "Didn't you say it doesn't hurt?" Lin Qing was surprised. "Nonsense, I definitely won't hurt if you patted my prosthetic leg. Just now, you directly patted the flesh of my knee. I'll use this strength to pat you a few times. Try to see if it hurts? Do you think I'm made of iron?" Kay said as he moved his leg to a safe position. "Noisy." Li Nanheng raised his hand and rubbed between his eyebrows. His indifferent words successfully silenced the 4 people in front of him and made them as quiet as chickens. Kay thought for a moment and moved closer to Li Nanheng. "Boss, I've been lying in bed since we were injured in Israel. I haven't had the chance to formally thank you. After all, I can stand up now. I just wanted to come over and say hello to you. There's no need to say anything. Just be quiet and don't bother me. Tisk, boss, I mean, can't you see that I can stand up now? But boss, in order to save me you really paid a big price. Even now your eyes haven't recovered. Boss, in the future my eyes will be your eyes. When you need me I'll come. Or if medicine is developed to a certain extent, I'll dig out my eyes for you. Perhaps because Kay's words were too bloody, the living room fell silent. Li Nanheng frowned, his expression somewhat disdainful. Really boss, my eyesight is very good. If I dig it out for you I think you can, don't? Li Nanheng raised his hand in resistance and pushed Kay's head away. With your shifty-eyed appearance you still want to put your eyes on my face? Do you know what it means to ruin a face with a pair of eyes? My perfect face can't be ruined by those eyes of yours. Today's candy has been delivered. Happy Labor Day holiday. The first day of May seems to be during the double monthly votes campaign. Begging for monthly votes? One vote becomes 2 votes, don't miss it. That's begging for monthly votes to extend my life. Chapter 1393. Oh my god, what's this? Feng Ling was used to cooking by herself every day in the past month, so she simply cooked a few more dishes. After bringing them to the table one by one, Lei Ping jumped up in surprise and dragged Tam and Lin Qing over. Our little Feng Ling is going to show off her cooking skills. Sure enough, women are different. If you really study cooking carefully you will soon learn it. Tam reached out and quietly grabbed a piece of meat and stuffed it into his mouth. He was amazed by the delicious taste and hurriedly picked up a tissue to wipe his hands, lest Feng Ling glared at him when she came out and found him eating with his hands. In the end, when Feng Ling came out, she saw that Li Nanheng was still sitting on the sofa, disdaining Kay's various organs from his eyes to his neck to his mouth and finally even his fingernails. Facing the boss he had always admired and now his savior, Kay was still very touched. On the dining table, the dishes that were originally filled with dishes were now inexplicably missing something. Either a few prawns were missing from one dish, or a few pieces of meat were missing from another dish. However, it seemed that the cutlery had not been touched. The others were also standing by the table with serious expressions. Feng Ling's expression was a little strange. She looked at them carefully. Tam waved at her with a smile. When will the meal be ready? Soon, right away. After speaking, Feng Ling turned to bring out the last medicinal soup she had just learned. When she walked to the dining table, she saw that there seemed to be 2 less prawns on the table. She turned to look at the culprit, Tam, and saw that he secretly clenched a tissue in his hand that he hadn't thrown away yet. She was angry and amused. If you are hungry, sit down and eat. Why are you standing there? I'm waiting for you to serve all the dishes. Although I have eaten your food before, it's rare for it to be so sumptuous. Seeing that he couldn't hide it anymore, Tam chuckled and quickly sat down. Lin Qing and Lei Peng looked back at the direction of the sofa and then gave Tam a look, indicating that boss hadn't come to sit down yet. Tam paused and turned his eyes. Kay, help boss come to eat. Hearing this, Kay hurriedly stood up and quickly helped Li Nanheng, who was still stuffed with a pillow in his arms. Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows. Your legs are really flexible. Hee hee. Kay smiled. Boss, let me help you over. In fact, Li Nanheng could get up and find the table by himself, but Kay's attitude was too enthusiastic. Li Nanheng didn't say anything more and let Kay help him walk. Then these lackeys acted as though they had seen the emperor arrive. Some helped him up, some pulled the chair and some prepared the tableware. Only when Li Nanheng sat down properly did they heave a sigh of relief. In this world, except for Li Nanheng, no one knew Feng Ling's cooking better than him. Smelling the fragrance of the various dishes on the table, Li Nanheng was not in a hurry to eat. Instead, he raised his eyebrows proudly as if praising himself for his wife. How is it? Tastes good? Not bad, really not bad. It's simply delicious. Tam had already picked up the tableware and started to eat the various dishes on the table. With a shrimp in his mouth he said, I remember that the food cooked by Feng Ling was edible before, but now it's really delicious. Kay also sat down. It seems that I have tasted Feng Ling's cooking more times than you. Tam immediately gave Kay a do you want to die look. Kay paused and then turned to see Boss Li's unfocused eyes. He immediately paused and hurriedly said to save himself, in fact, I haven't tasted it many times. Among so many of us, only Boss has tasted it the most times. Li Nanheng coldly glanced at him, and Kay hurriedly lowered his head to pick up the tableware to eat. After taking a few bites, Lin Qing said, in fact, Feng Ling used very little oil, salt and seasoning. This is all because boss is not suitable for food with too much oil and salt, right? You can still make it so delicious in this case. It can be seen that Feng Ling really worked hard to satisfy boss's desire for good food and nourish his body at the same time. I saw a few pieces of paper stuck on the range hood in the kitchen just now. I took a look at them. They seem to be recipes and seasoning methods. Yes, I also saw that the iPad is lit up. It seems to be a recipe. Feng Ling is so hardworking now. Boss, you will really be blessed in the future. Li Nanheng was very satisfied with being flattered. He sat at the dining table and picked up the tableware. In fact, his movements were very smooth. However, because he had gradually gotten used to life no matter what he did, it seemed that his eyes would not affect him. Seeing that their boss was in such a good state, the 4 lackeys naturally did not dare to mention his eyes again. They said whatever they were happy about. They even mentioned that when their boss had an accident in Israel because the people sent by the base really could not find their boss, on the day they announced that there was no need to go to Israel again, Ah Feng sat alone in front of the small silver plates of the deceased brothers in front of the base hall and cried for an entire night. When everyone found him the next morning, he was still lying on the ground with a few bottles of wine that he had gotten from Han Jin beside him. He reeked of alcohol, and when he was helped back he kept saying, "Boss, when are you coming back? Boss, come back to see me. Boss, give me a dream," completely destroying his usual calm image. Li Nanheng listened expressionlessly. The base doesn't have unlimited resources, especially the elite search and rescue team. If there's an official mission, we still have to go out. We can't keep mobilizing all the firepower in the base just because Kay and I are dead or alive. It's not easy for him to persist for so long, but for the sake of the overall situation of the base, it's understandable that he stopped sending people to search and rescue. If I were him, I would make the same decision. Speaking up to here, Li Nanheng said lightly, "Didn't you guys return to the base because you made up for your crimes?" "Yes." Tam immediately raised his eyes. "Boss, you know?" Li Nanheng was calm and composed. "No matter what, it was you guys and Feng Ling who went to find me and Kay. If you don't give you a chance to make up for your crimes, Ah Feng, the current person in charge of the base, can scram." "Hee, I knew that, boss. You look cold and kind. You're loyal to us." Chapter 1394. Lin Qing knocked on Tam's head and said softly, "That's because we brought Feng Ling with us. Our boss's steel is all around Feng Ling. Why would he talk about brotherhood with you? Who the hell are you?" "Don't say that. Our boss treats us brothers quite well," Lei Ping quickly said. Li Nanheng picked up a glass of water on the table and took a sip. He said calmly, "Lin Qing is right. The one you should thank is Feng Ling, the 4 lackeys. He just wanted to come over and flatter boss. How could he taste the taste of public display of affection? Did boss Li's feelings for Feng Ling overflow? Did he love her to the point of insanity? He didn't even want their brotherhood and only wanted Feng Ling. Feng Ling had already walked over and sat down beside Li Nanheng. She asked casually, "What are you thanking me for?" "Thank the heavens, thank the earth, and thank Feng Ling for letting boss find his desire to live," Lei Peng said vaguely as he picked at the dishes in his bowl. Feng Ling glanced at him strangely and then saw that the others were choked by the dog food. She simply ignored them and habitually scooped a bowl of medicinal soup and placed it in front of Li Nanheng. "Drink more of this soup. It's good for nourishing your energy and blood. By the way, I haven't made the things in the 2 gift boxes that Xiao Su sent last time. Coincidentally, there are many people here today. Why don't you all stay tonight and I'll make those things for you to eat?" The 4 lackeys still didn't know what the so-called gift boxes were. Before they could reply, Li Nanheng had just picked up the bowl and was about to drink the soup. He paused and almost spat it out. He forced himself to swallow the medicinal soup in his mouth. "There's no need. I don't think they'll stay that late," Li Nanheng said coldly. Although these 4 lackeys had nothing to do in the afternoon and wanted to stay here for a while longer, when they heard Boss Li's cold hint, none of them dared to answer Feng Ling but said, Yes, don't bother. We have to go back to the base in a while. We don't have to bring our share for dinner." That's right. Don't bother. We have to return to the base in a while. We don't have to bring our share for dinner." "That's right, we'll be leaving soon." Seeing that they spoke in unison, Feng Ling did not say much. She said, "I think boss doesn't like the things in that gift box. There were several times when I wanted to make it but he refused. Why don't I bring it back for you?" "Wait, I'll go get it for you." "What is it?" Kay asked curiously. Feng Ling was about to stand up when her hand suddenly sank. Li Nanheng raised his hand and accurately held her hand. He then firmly pressed her back to the chair by the dining table. "Sit down. You don't have to give it to them. I'll eat." Feng Ling glanced at him. Last time you said that you didn't want to eat it. There aren't many tonics that taste good. When have you seen me take the initiative to take medicine? They can't stand things that are too nutritious. Li Nanheng's voice was strangely cold and hard. He forcefully held Feng Ling and prevented her from showing them those things. Seeing that he insisted, Feng Ling did not stand up again. She looked at the 4 lackeys and felt that it was not good to let them go back empty-handed. However, since boss had already spoken, the 4 of them definitely did not dare to take anything away, so she could only give up. After the meal, the 4 lackeys who wanted to sit here for a while left very cooperatively. Before they left, they helped Feng Ling clean up the dining table and kitchen. They were all very clean and nimble. Then they left happily. The house finally returned to its usual silence. Feng Ling simply hugged the iPad and sat on the soft ground in front of the floor-to-ceiling window in the living room. She used the iPad to discuss matters with the heads of the various departments of the Feng Corporation in New York. Although she had the intention of handing the Feng Corporation to Qin Shuk, and the 2 elders of the Feng family were not particularly opposed to this, Qin Shuk did not want to take the lead. She only did all the urgent matters at hand, but she was used to handing over more matters that needed Feng Ling to decide to her. As a result, Feng Ling still had to communicate with the company when she was free. Every day she would repeat the same thing endlessly, which was to persuade Qin Shuk to let her take over the Feng Corporation. After all, Qin Shuk was a relative of the Feng family. She was very kind and filial to the 2 elders of the Feng family. She had grown up in front of them and was no different from a granddaughter. After failing to persuade her again, Feng Ling smiled helplessly and typed another line of words on the iPad. At this moment, Qin Shuk changed the topic. Is Li Nanheng by your side? Feng Ling paused and turned back to look at Li Nanheng, who had walked over from the sofa and was sitting cross-legged next to her. Earlier she was busy talking to Qin Shuk. Although she felt that he had come, she did not pay much attention. Now she realized that he was very close to her and was sitting on the same soft carpet as her. The sunlight outside the window landed on the 2 of them. She replied, When are you 2 going to get married? Feng Ling held her chin with one hand and looked at the line of words on the iPad screen. She then turned to look at Li Nanheng beside her. When the sunlight landed on his body and face, his eyes, which were not covered with gauze, subconsciously narrowed slightly. Right now you are very sensitive to light. The doctor said that if you can maintain the condition of being able to see light, it means that the blood clot that oppresses the optic nerve is not stubborn, Feng Ling said softly. Li Nanheng looked out of the window. Really? Qin Shuk asked me when I will marry you, she said again. Li Nanheng's brows moved slightly, and he turned his face to her in surprise. You can't wait? Feng Ling held her chin with one hand and gently tapped her face with her fingers. Her voice sounded very normal as she said, Qin Shuk is asking me. I'm just relaying her question. Then what are your plans? Li Nanheng leaned his body slightly toward her. His tall figure was by her side, and his slightly narrowed eyes were close to her head. When the sunlight landed on his eyes, she realized that this man's eyelashes were actually very long. They were warmly illuminated by the sunlight. Although he could not see, he instinctively blinked a few times. Chapter 1395. What plans can I have? Feng Ling tilted her head and looked at him. After all, I lost, so I can only listen to your arrangements. Hearing her say the word lost, Li Nanheng snorted. Back then your cenotaph directly entered the Li family's ancestral hall. Even if you haven't officially married me for so many years, you have long been recognized by our Li family's ancestors. If you want to marry, can't you marry at any time? These words made it seem as though she was destined to be locked with Li Nanheng for the rest of her life. After nearly a month, the weather in Los Angeles had already entered the hot summer. Feng Ling finally convinced Qin Shuk. She could finally officially take a vacation and no longer have to care about the Feng Corporation's matters. Every day she could cook for Li Nanheng in her apartment and the apartment that originally belonged to Li Nanheng, massage him, and water the flowers and weeds on the balcony. Every day Feng Ling said that she wanted to cut her hair back to its previous length. Li Nanheng had no objections. He only said, it's just that he can't see it now. When he occasionally touches her, he can immediately feel her hair. If it's short, he probably won't be able to touch it in the future. Because of his words, Feng Ling gave up on the plan to cut her hair short. Every day she simply tied her hair behind her head. Occasionally, Feng Ling would drive Li Nanheng to the hospital for a checkup. The doctor said that he had recovered well in all aspects, and his physical strength had recovered well. It was much better than expected, but the blood clot in his brain had yet to absorb itself. It was still pressing on his optic nerves, causing his vision to not recover for the time being. But at least everything was developing in the right direction. Li Nanheng was a man. All day long, Feng Ling would coax him gently and occasionally coldly order him to take medicine, eat, and sleep. He would eat and sleep all day. When he was bored, he would take a walk downstairs in the nearby park. The Li family often sent him this kind of tonic. Although Li Nanheng asked those tonics to be placed in the cabinet, Li Nanheng had already gained a lot of weight in the short 2 months he was by Feng Ling's side. When he first returned from Israel, he had lost 15 pounds. In the 2 months after he was discharged, he had gained 7 to 8 pounds. Did you say that you'll accompany me to take a shower after I gain 8 kilograms? Li Nanheng had just measured his weight and was about to take a shower when he suddenly stopped in front of the bathroom door and turned back to look at Feng Ling. Feng Ling was about to help him get a change of clothes when she heard his words. She paused and turned to see the man standing in front of the bathroom as though waiting for her figure. She murmured, "Haven't I been helping you wash every day? Let's shower together." Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows. Feng Ling. For 2 whole months she took care of Li Nanheng's daily life dutifully every day, but the most intimate moment every day was when she helped him take a bath before he went to bed. This man would take the opportunity to kiss her face from time to time, but he didn't do anything. After all, she had been taking care of his health and didn't want to arouse his fire. She just wanted him to recover quickly and didn't have any other evil thoughts. She didn't have any evil thoughts, but it didn't mean that this man didn't have any. Several times when he was taking a shower, he deliberately got water on her and then wanted to pull her clothes. No matter what, he wanted to kiss her in the bathroom or do something with her, but in the end she escaped. Later she said that as long as he continued to take care of his body, he would say it again when he gained at least 8 pounds. At that time she said that if he gained at least 8 pounds he would say it again. It was just a talk. It wasn't like she really wanted to take off her clothes and shower naked with him in the bathroom. Even if they really bathed together, Feng Ling wouldn't mind. However, he couldn't see right now and his body still had to rest. The doctor said that his cardiovascular and cerebrovascular aspects were still very weak. After all, he had suffered such a serious injury back then. Right now, he couldn't suffer too much emotional fluctuations and some physical impulses. Every time Feng Ling felt that he might faint in the bathroom for more than 20 minutes, she was always very careful. However, Li Nanheng's physical fitness was really good. It always exceeded her imagination. In the past 2 months after returning to recuperate, not to mention the fact that he had never fainted once, even if he accidentally fell because he couldn't see, he could immediately stand up and continue walking without a change in expression. He didn't complain at all. So, for a person with a strong mental fortitude like him, how bad was his body in Israel for him to not acknowledge her? At that time he might have felt that he would die at any moment. Feng Ling wanted to avoid the topic of bathing and only went to get a change of clothes for him. "Hurry up and go take a shower. Don't talk so much nonsense. There are still a few bowls that haven't been washed. There's no need to use the dishwasher. I'll go wash them by hand." As she spoke, she entered her daily safe haven kitchen. The sound of the water in the kitchen was on. This place was some distance from the bathroom, so Feng Ling didn't listen carefully. However, she had just finished washing a bowl and was quickly wiping the water on it with a cloth towel when a tall shadow suddenly pressed against her from behind. She glanced at the shadow on the wall in front of her and didn't say anything until the man accurately found her and hugged her from behind. "I told you to take a shower. Don't move. Don't break the bowl later." Can't I hug you?" Li Nanheng, who failed to successfully bring his little wife into the bathroom, hugged her tightly from behind. The tap had been turned on, and the chopsticks and bowls that had been washed were still scattered in the sink. Feng Ling forcefully pulled out a hand to turn it off, but because Li Nanheng failed to bring her into the bathroom, he tugged at her from behind and kissed her hair, ears, and the back of her neck for a long time. Feng Ling took the opportunity to pull her hand back and quickly turned off the water. She then placed the bowl that had just been wiped into the disinfection cabinet. Her cheeks were slightly red, but her voice was solemn. "Li Nanheng, the doctor said that you have to rest quietly. You'd better restrain yourself. I've already been quiet for so long. How do you want me to restrain myself?" He had to prove that his injury was not there. "Anyway, the doctor said that you have to rest well. Rest for a year or so." Before she could finish speaking, she felt her waist being strangled. The man was much taller than her and forcefully pressed her against the edge of the cabinet. He then turned around and pushed her against the glass door of the disinfection cabinet. "You." Chapter 1396. Feng Ling hurriedly tried to push him away, but before she could do so, Li Nanheng pressed her against the door of the disinfection cabinet, harshly. The vertical disinfection cabinet, which was much taller than a person, immediately creaked. It was so clear that it could almost cover the sound of the TV in the living room. Feng Ling's ears were kissed by the man, and her face was burning red. She couldn't say a word as he pressed against her. She wanted to turn away, but he pressed her hand against the cabinet behind her. Boss? Feng Ling's voice, which had always been calm, suddenly changed at the end. She tried to break free, but he held her even more tightly. As she struggled, the stacked bowls in the cabinet fell with a crash, the sound crisp and deafening. Feng Ling took the opportunity to turn away in this narrow space, frowned and said unhappily, Li Nanheng. She finally avoided his kiss, grabbed Li Nanheng's unruly hand, and before she could push him away she was pressed against the glass door again. The man's breath was slightly heavy, and his lips were inseparable from hers. In the warm yellow light of the kitchen, it was as though the two of them had become one. I say, you haven't recovered yet. Don't mess around. After a long while, Feng Ling finally found a chance to speak between his lips and teeth. There was even a hint of warning and annoyance in her voice, but this warning was completely meaningless to him now, and it couldn't hide her blushing cheeks. She resisted hoarsely and said, Did you eat something wrong? Shouldn't I be asking you? Li Nanheng's breath blew against her ear. You're the one who cooked. Didn't you make everything I ate? Feng Ling was silent for an instant. What did she do tonight? The light shone from behind Li Nanheng. His eyes were unfocused, but they were still in the direction of her face. He raised his hand, stroked her red and hot lips, and suddenly asked without rhyme or reason, Did you secretly take out those 2 boxes of tonics? Feng Ling froze again, and an indescribable feeling suddenly rose in her heart. Could it be that there was a problem with those supplements? I saw that those things have been stored there for a long time, and I saw that your body is much better now, but you should still take some supplements. I don't know if you can adapt to the taste, so I stewed a small amount of venison into the ginseng soup. Didn't you ask me what kind of meat it was? It's venison, but I didn't put much. The two of them looked at each other for a moment. An inexplicable and subtle feeling that was even more ambiguous than kissing permeated the air. On the TV outside, a host was announcing something in fluent American English. All kinds of deliberate applause and laughter seemed particularly abrupt at this moment. Fortunately, it's just venison. The man's hoarse voice pressed against her ear. If it were deer penis, turtle meat, or sea cucumber, I'm afraid you would have been swallowed alive by me. Feng Ling was really stunned. Li Nanheng let go of her and turned to walk out with a helpless smile, heading straight for the bathroom. It took her a long time to react. What's wrong with venison? Seeing that the man had already entered the bathroom, she followed him out. After a while, she heard the sound of water coming from the bathroom. He was now very familiar with walking around in this house and taking a bath himself. Even if she didn't go in to help him, he could still do it. She stood outside for a while, but she didn't see any heat on the translucent bathroom glass door. After watching for a few minutes, she realized that he had gone in to take a cold shower. Feng Ling subconsciously hurried to find out what exactly these things were used to supplement the deer whip and venison. When she found out the result, her expression was no wonder. She held the iPad and looked at the answers displayed on the webpage. Her face was even hotter than when he had pressed her against the disinfection cabinet. She quickly closed the webpage and went to prepare a cup of chrysanthemum tea for him to clear his internal heat. After Li Nanheng took a shower, he came out with cold air. If it weren't for the fact that his physical condition was much better, he wouldn't have been able to withstand this kind of cold shower. However, when she saw that he was in good condition, it seemed that his body's resistance was much better and he wouldn't catch a cold easily. Then drink this. Feng Ling quickly handed him the tea. Li Nanheng took it. Coincidentally, he had just taken a shower and was still a little cold. He touched the cup and took a sip. Then he raised his brows. What is this? Chrysanthemum tea, Feng Ling said and then added, it's for clearing heat and detoxifying. After speaking, she went into the study and said before closing the door, Go ice your eyes. I'll go to the study and talk to Qin Shuk about some business. Then she decisively closed the door. Li Nanheng held the cup of chrysanthemum tea and a helpless smile immediately hung on his face. After enduring for so long, how much effect could a few mouthfuls of venison have? Wasn't it all because she had already stirred up the fire by walking around in front of him every day? However, it couldn't be said that it was useless. At least, he could calmly endure it and restrain himself. Tonight, he felt that it was a little difficult to restrain himself. There was still a lot of coldness on his body. Even Li Nanheng's breath was cold. He closed his eyes, which had been feeling a little itchy and painful these days, and drank the tea in the cup. Feng Ling hid in the study and didn't talk to Qin Shuk at all. After all, she had already handed over the company's matters. Right now she had nothing to do. The only important thing was to take care of Li Nanheng every day. After sitting inside for a while, seeing that there was no movement outside, Feng Ling thought for a moment and got up to open the door of the study. She first opened a gap in the door of the study. Seeing that Li Nanheng was not in the living room, she opened the door completely and walked out. Did he go back to the bedroom to sleep? His eyes hadn't been iced yet, so he couldn't sleep like this. Feng Ling was silent for 2 seconds. She felt that ever since Li Nanheng returned from Israel, she had really been worried. She went to the fridge to take out the things that needed to be iced and then went to the bedroom. She pushed open the bedroom door and was startled to see that the lights inside were dim. She subconsciously turned back to see if Li Nanheng was in another room or had returned to the bedroom. However, the moment she turned her head, the lights behind her suddenly lit up, and the bedroom door opened in an instant. She was about to dodge, but the man in the bedroom was even faster. He grabbed her waist and carried her in before she could retaliate. The bed was not far from the door. She was only forced to stagger back a few steps before she was pressed heavily onto the bed. Chapter 1397. The moment Feng Ling was pressed onto the bed, she couldn't get angry. Not knowing whether to laugh or cry, she pushed his shoulder hard. It's useless to take a cold shower and drink tea to clear the fire. Li Nanheng raised his brows teasingly and touched Feng Ling's face at the same time. Because she was suddenly pressed onto the bed, her hair that was tied up behind her head was scattered on the soft blanket, making her entire face even whiter and softer. He couldn't see it, but he could touch it and feel it. I didn't know those things were bought for you by the elders of the Li family. Halfway through her words, Feng Ling suddenly saw that the man's gaze deepened and immediately stopped talking. You've checked? You're reacting so strongly. How can I not check? Otherwise, I would have thought that I poisoned you. Feng Ling awkwardly raised her hand to cover her eyes. But the doctor warned me repeatedly not to let you do any strenuous exercise. Even if you think you've recovered, you still have to be careful. If I had known that those things had such an effect, I would have hidden them long ago. I wouldn't have used them to stew soup for you. Then what should I do now? I've already drunk them. As Li Nanheng spoke, he took advantage of the position of pressing down on her and deliberately pushed her hard. Feng Ling rolled her eyes at him. You clearly know the effects of those tonics, but you didn't say it. You did it on purpose, didn't you? You deliberately waited for me to make those things for you to eat on a whim. In the end, you said that I was the culprit. Even if you really raped me, I can only say that I brought it upon myself, right? Who asked you to say that? What do you mean by raped you? The smile on Li Nanheng's lips did not fade. He pecked her lips again and again. You've been going to Israel to look for me for more than 10 or 20 years or even a lifetime. You're so deeply in love with me. Do you still need me to rape you with such a two-arrow relationship? Feng Ling, she knew that she shouldn't have confessed to him. He really remembered it after just one time. In the past, he had never received a positive response from her. She had only confessed once. She abruptly sat up. The man didn't press her down, but he still placed his leg on hers, preventing her from getting off the bed. All right, I won't mess with you anymore. Seeing that she was really about to leave, Li Nanheng quickly raised his hand and touched the air. Then he turned to touch her shoulder and pressed her back into his arms. I've been recuperating here for so long, but you haven't slept with me once. You just don't want to sleep on the same bed with me. I just want to sleep with you. You drank venison soup tonight and you still want to sleep with me in your arms? If I agree, what's the difference between a sheep walking into a tiger's mouth? Feng Ling would not be easily fooled by him now. With that, she broke away from him and quickly got out of bed. I've put the ice compress for your eyes on the bed. You apply it yourself. I'm going to take a shower and go to bed. It's getting late. Hearing her footsteps leave the bedroom door, Li Nanheng's smile did not fade. He casually touched the bed, picked up the ice pack and medicine, and squeezed them in his hand. After about half an hour, Feng Ling took a shower and dried her hair. She habitually went to Li Nanheng's bedroom every day to see if he had fallen asleep peacefully, but today she felt that there was no need to visit him. After such a long time, he should have fallen asleep by now. Furthermore, she had clearly rejected him earlier. He should know that she was very careful and didn't want to provoke him again. However, just as Feng Ling lay down to sleep, suddenly her bedroom door opened. There was only a dim bedside lamp in the room. The man pushed the door open and groped his way over, but it was clear that he was not as familiar with the facilities in her room as the other bedroom. His feet stepped on the soft carpet, and he moved forward until his legs touched the end of the bed. Feng Ling's expression faltered. She was about to get up when the man touched the edge of the bed and leaned over. Smelling the fragrance of the shower gel on her body, he lifted the quilt and climbed into her bed. Feng Ling. Li Nanheng, stop messing around. I'm not messing around. The man did not waste any time and lay down. Seeing that he really just wanted to sleep on the same bed as her and had no intention of messing around, Feng Ling tried her best to ignore her slightly red ears. She looked at him for a long while and finally had no choice but to let him lie down. Have you applied it to your eyes? She turned off the bedside lamp and asked. Yes. How do your eyes feel today? Do you feel any swelling pain? She asked again as she lay down. The man did not answer. Instead, he closed his eyes and his breathing gradually became even. Just like that, he fell asleep? Feng Ling's night vision was not bad. She could see the man's silhouette in the dark. She saw that he had fallen asleep on her bed. Because of the medicine and the ice compress, he was used to falling asleep the moment he touched the bed. But this was also good, lest he torment her again. Feng Ling didn't even notice that the corners of her lips curved up. She lay quietly by his side. After a while, Li Nanheng's breathing was still even, but she gently turned over by his side, gently raised her hand and placed it on the man's body. She pressed against him and hugged him, leaning her face on his shoulder, breathing in the fragrance of the shower gel and medicine on his body before gradually falling asleep. Late at night, Li Nanheng woke up faintly. He turned over and felt the little woman beside him hugging him. He smiled in the darkness and raised his hand to pull her into his arms. The next morning. How do I look today? Do I look energetic? The second brother of the Li family sat in the car behind and yawned for the 20th time. He said weakly, "You're very energetic. You look more than 10 years younger. Your granddaughter-in-law definitely won't dislike you." Li Junyan lowered his head to check his suit. At the same time, he touched the exquisite golden sandalwood walking stick by his hand and said calmly, "After all, after so many years, this is the first time he has come to see his granddaughter-in-law. He has also taken care of Nanheng for so long. It's rare for him to visit, so he has to tidy himself up. Otherwise the young people will dislike us old men." Second brother Li sneered. "It's already good enough that Feng Ling doesn't dislike you for chasing her out of the base back then. Do you still expect him to see the handsomeness from decades ago on your old face?" Li Junyan gave his second brother a cold glance. Back then, who knew that Nanheng would be so devoted to her? Let's forget about this matter. Don't mention it. Don't mention it. Chapter 1398. Whenever I mention this, you feel guilty. Second brother Li snorted. When they arrived at the apartment and got out of the car, third brother and fourth brother in the other car were also dressed exceptionally well. However, as Li Nanheng's grandfather, Li Junyan, after getting out of the car, deliberately raised his hand to adjust his collar. After confirming that there was no problem at all, he used his walking stick to walk toward the lush garden in front of him. Third brother whispered to fourth brother from behind, "Didn't we just come here for lunch?" Fourth brother nodded. "Indeed." "Then big brother looks like he's going on a blind date. There's nothing he can do. After all, every time he sees Feng Ling he feels guilty." Back then, the girl was lying pitifully on the ground, but she was still chased away by him. Before fourth brother could finish speaking, Li Junyan suddenly stopped in front of them. He turned back and glared at them fiercely. "The three of you were also involved. Second brother, third brother, and fourth brother." Therefore, the security guards in front of the residential area were all sitting in the security room at this moment. They looked at the four well-dressed old men who didn't look like ordinary people and raised their hands to tidy up their collars and cuffs in unison. Each of them looked extremely serious and solemn as they walked in. At the same time, on the top floor of the apartment. This morning, she suddenly received a call from the Li family saying that the four elders had come to visit Li Nanheng. Feng Ling felt that her apartment was still a little small, so she went to Li Nanheng's apartment on the top floor. She was busy preparing lunch. Her busy figure really looked like a little wife who had been at home for a long time. It was as though she had completely lost the valiant and heroic bearing she usually had when she went to the battlefield with a gun. Li Nanheng stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows and felt the sunlight outside. When Feng Ling passed by behind him, he said, "Find time to open up both floors. Otherwise, you won't have to go back and forth like this. Your top floor is already a duplex. Including my floor, doesn't that add up to 3 floors?" 3 floors it is. The space is larger and the two are merged into one. Li Nanheng spoke as he looked at the sunlight outside the window. Perhaps it was because the sun was too hot today, but the light was too direct. It seemed to be much brighter than it had been 2 months ago. There was such a dazzling light that penetrated through the endless darkness. Feng Ling had been busy all morning. Li Nanheng said, "Let's invite an auntie over. You don't even have time to sit down and rest." "I have nothing to do when I'm free. This is pretty good." As Feng Ling spoke, she pulled him to the sofa to sit down. "Wasn't it like this when we were in the jungle? You were busy all day just to have a good sleep and a full meal? This is the nature of human existence." After Li Nanheng sat down, he did not let go of her. Instead, he pulled her into his arms. Feng Ling suddenly sat on his lap. Afraid that she would hurt him, she hurriedly tried to get up, but the man held her tightly around the waist. "Those old ones have to take a walk, exercise, and feed the birds in the morning. They won't come so early. Sit down and rest." Feng Ling was caught off guard and was pressed onto the sofa by the man. Her entire body sank into the sofa and the man pressed down. However, before she could struggle, the man grabbed her wrist and held her. Feng Ling raised her eyes. Li Nanheng slowly leaned down and stopped less than 5 centimeters away from her nose. "Happy birthday." Feng Ling tilted her head back. Although she couldn't pull away from him, her expression faltered. "Whose birthday is it?" "You." "Why don't I know it's my birthday?" Li Nanheng took out her phone from her pocket and showed it to her. "I can't see it, but it doesn't mean that I don't know what day it is." Feng Ling's expression paused for a long while before she recalled that this date was her real date of birth. After she returned to the Feng family, the 2 elders of the Feng family had specially registered her birth certificate, but she had never seriously celebrated her birthday since she was young. After all, she didn't know the exact day, so she was used to not taking it to heart and didn't deliberately remember it. Looking at the date displayed on the screen, she said, "So the 4 elders of the Li family came today too. They specially came to celebrate their future granddaughter-in-law's birthday." As Li Nanheng spoke, he threw his phone on the sofa and lowered his head to kiss the tip of her nose twice. "So even if you don't prepare anything, they won't blame you. Instead, they're more willing to treat you out to eat. They don't want to see you so busy for everyone's lunch. It's precisely because the 4 elders are coming that I want to do something myself. It's not for anything else. I just hope that they can see that I'm working hard to take care of you, lest..." "Lest what?" "Lest they feel uneasy and want to bring me back to the Li family?" "No, I'm not that unconfident, but I still hope they can rest assured. Oh, I feel that if you can conceive a child now, they will be more at ease. I guarantee that before the child is born, they won't easily come to disturb us. Li Nanheng, don't rub against me at a time like this, okay?" With that, she hurriedly reached down to push the man away a little, but the man rubbed against her a few more times nastily. "Li Nanheng, we're under the same roof every day. You don't let me rape you, nor do you allow me to tease you. You just walk around in front of me every day, not allowing me to go in and not allowing me to rub against you?" Li Nanheng refused to let go. "It's fine if I rub against you. It won't do anything. It's broad daylight, Li Nanheng. Just because it's daytime, I hugged you to sleep for 2 consecutive nights. Do you know how much restraint I used?" Feng Ling was blushing when the doorbell suddenly rang. The 2 people on the sofa were startled. Feng Ling quickly took the opportunity to push him away. She raised her hand to tidy up her slightly messy hair. "You said that they wouldn't come so early. Since they said they would come today, they definitely won't take too long. If it weren't for you, I would have already put the dishes into the pot." Li Nanheng snorted indifferently. "If they hadn't come at such a good time, I would have already stuffed their great-grandchildren into your stomach." Feng Ling resisted the urge to take off her shoes and hit him. She rushed to open the door. The moment she opened the door, the 4 elders stood neatly outside the door. Their expressions were dignified and solemn. It was as though they were about to return to their country to raise the flag at the Tiananmen Square. The countdown to the double monthly vote is in 4 days. Dads, if you have a monthly vote, vote now and what will come will come. Don't be anxious. Wink. Chapter 1399. Originally, the other elders of the Li family were quite relaxed. After being warned by Li Junyan, when they saw Feng Ling open the door, they could not relax. Feng Ling was very polite. After all, she had long known about the Li family's 4 elders' bad and stubborn tempers. She nodded at them when she opened the door. Elder Li, however, she wasn't sure if she should call them elderly or call them eldest brother to 4th brother. Fortunately, before she could continue, Li Junyan had already asked, Is Nanheng still resting? No, he woke up very early. Recently his body has been recovering well. He doesn't need to stay in the bedroom often, Feng Ling said as she moved aside and brought a few new pairs of indoor slippers over. In the living room, Li Nanheng, who had quickly tidied up the messy pillows and blankets on the sofa, was sitting upright. He picked up a cup of cold honey water on the coffee table and raised his brows in the direction of the Li elders as though nothing had happened. You're here? The 4 elders of the Li family had not seen Li Nanheng after he was discharged from the hospital. Seeing Li Nanheng's natural expression, they almost thought that his eyes had recovered. However, upon closer inspection they knew that it was not good. Li Nanheng could accurately find their location by listening to the sound. Although his eyes were looking in this direction, the focus of his eyes could not completely meet them. Although there were no traces on the sofa, there was an ordinary cup of water and a plate of half-eaten fruit on the coffee table, as well as an iPad that was casually placed on it. However, the 2 buttons on the collar of Li Nanheng's home clothes were slightly pulled open by Feng Ling's struggle, and there was a red mark on his collarbone that was accidentally scratched by her nails. Although it was very shallow, indicating that the scratch was not heavy, it was obvious at a glance, and it had clearly happened just now. The Li family's 3rd elder. The 4 elders were so experienced. How could they not tell what had happened in this quiet living room? The atmosphere was a little strange and they were all considering if they had come at the wrong time. Feeling the strange atmosphere, Li Nanheng? ? Nanheng, how do your eyes feel? Li Junyan spoke first. Since they were already here, they wouldn't disturb the 2 of them making dolls in broad daylight. At most, they wouldn't stay here at night and wouldn't disturb them. Fortunately, I can occasionally see some light. Li Nanheng put down the honey water in his hand and raised his hand slightly. This is where I lived a few years ago. It's not Feng Ling's. Don't be so reserved. She was afraid that you would be too reserved when you went to her place, so she specially changed places. What's yours and hers? What's yours is hers. Li Junyan walked over and sat down beside Li Nanheng. The other 3 old men also sat on the sofa next to him, but 3rd elder Li was always restless. After sitting for a while, he got up and looked at Li Nanheng's apartment in Los Angeles. After all, he had never had a chance to come here before. Hearing Grandfather Li's words, Feng Ling was speechless and could only look at Li Nanheng. Li Nanheng habitually pulled the blanket over his legs. Although he couldn't see it, he could feel it. Under the gazes of the 4 elders of the Li family and Feng Ling, he raised his brows. Yes, what's mine is hers. My grandfather is her grandfather. Sooner or later she will have to enter the Li family. Feng Ling, do you hear that? Be mentally prepared. You don't have to call me Elder Li anymore. Just call me eldest grandpa to 4th grandpa. Yes. Feng Ling, I'm your 3rd grandpa. I'm your 4th grandpa. I'm your 2nd grandpa. Grandpa Li Junyan, cough. Feng Ling's expression was even stranger than the 4 elders earlier. Because of Feng Ling's unfamiliarity, the atmosphere in the guest room once again reached an indescribable level. Even though Feng Ling felt that it was unlikely, she felt that these 4 awe-inspiring elders really seemed to have come to ask for their granddaughter-in-law. In fact, her nature was still not very suitable for crowded and lively occasions. Only in front of the brothers who were particularly close to the base and in front of Li Nanheng could she occasionally release herself. Now that the 4 elders were all here, she really couldn't be casual. However, with the thought that the 4 elders might just take a wait-and-see attitude toward her, she pretended that she didn't hear what they said just now and coughed as if nothing had happened. Would the 4 of you like to make some tea? She remembered that there were 2 tea cakes in Li Nanheng's apartment. She wasn't used to drinking this kind of tea, but it was said that this kind of tea cake was very, very expensive. The cheapest tea cake cost hundreds of thousands or even millions. She didn't know which friend from China sent it to him, but Li Nanheng didn't seem to be interested in tea. He didn't even open the tea cake. However, it was said that these 4 elders liked tea very much. It was understandable for them to use this level of tea to show their filial piety. No need to trouble yourself, no need to trouble yourself. 4th elder quickly glanced at boss. Li Junyan suddenly reacted from Feng Ling's attire. Yes, there's no need to trouble yourself. The 4 old men looked at each other and then sat on the sofa. Their postures were very proper, and then they stared at Feng Ling's face as though they wanted to see a flower on her face. Feng Ling didn't know what to say. She felt that she had to find something to do. She definitely couldn't sit opposite the sofa and let the elders stare at her like Li Nanheng. She used the excuse of guiding them to make tea to slip away. 2 minutes passed. The living room was silent. The elders found it unbelievable. Previously, when Li Nanheng had just returned to Los Angeles, the 4 elders of the Li family had seen Feng Ling in the hospital. Although Feng Ling didn't linger outside Li Nanheng's ward, she had been waiting silently in the hospital. When they met by chance, although she also had long hair like this, she still looked the same as when she was in the base. She was calm and indifferent, and she only nodded politely to the 4 elders. However, when they entered the door, they saw that Feng Ling was wearing a set of home clothes that were the same as Li Nanheng's. Her hair was tied up and she looked clean and busy. She really looked like a little wife at home. She had completely lost the cold sharpness she had when she was in the base. It turned out that Feng Ling also had such a woman's side. The little girl looked reserved and polite. She didn't speak much, but people liked her from the bottom of their hearts. Although her personality was cold, she was very meticulous. If she gave birth to a child in the future, she would definitely be a good mother. Chapter 1400. So, how could they be so heartless as to drive him out of the base back then? Thinking back to how Li Nanheng hadn't returned to the Li family for 2 years and was only willing to return to the Li family occasionally after finding Feng Ling, it was really understandable. Thankfully, this girl was still their grandson's. If Feng Ling really had no fate with Nanheng, not only would Nanheng have regrets in this life, but the few of them would also be extremely regretful. The 3rd elder of the Li family probably couldn't stand this heavy atmosphere of reminiscence. After some consideration, he said, "Has Feng Ling really been taking care of you alone recently?" Li Nanheng glanced at him with unfocused eyes. "Otherwise, what do you think?" "Feng Ling, this girl is not bad. I see that you're not as thin as when you first returned to America. You look good. You've grown fat and strong. I don't think it'll take long. After your eyes recover, it'll be fine." As 3rd elder spoke, he specially looked at Li Nanheng's eyes. "Then take a look. Don't you know who my wife is?" Li Nanheng was not embarrassed. Feng Ling, who was brewing tea next door. After that, the elders finally began to formally express their condolences. They repeatedly asked Li Nanheng if he was still feeling unwell. They even wanted to lift his sleeves and trousers to see how his wounds were healing. Looking at the various scars left behind, they kept sighing and complaining that Li Junyan shouldn't have been so heartless as to throw his grandson to the base. The Li family only had this grandson. If something really happened to him and he couldn't be saved, he would probably have no descendants in the future. Feng Ling brewed the tea and placed it in front of the 4 elders. After nodding politely at them, she felt that it was not right to keep dodging. Just as she was about to sit down, 2nd elder Li pulled Li Junyan away from Li Nanheng and gave Feng Ling a look, indicating for her to sit next to Nanheng. Feng Ling had no choice but to sit down. When Feng Ling came out to brew tea, she also took out a fruit plate. After all, she didn't know what others usually brought when they entertained their elders. She just used whatever she had at home. The fruits in the fruit plate had been washed clean by her. "Feng Ling, come eat an apple." In order to ease the awkward atmosphere outside the house, 4th elder Li picked up an apple and handed it to her. Feng Ling quickly said, please eat, please eat." "Aya, don't stand on ceremony. Go ahead and eat." No, please eat, please eat." All of a sudden, Li Nanheng reached over and took the apple from Feng Ling and 4th brother Li's hands. He took a bite and said, "All right, I'll eat it." "Diske, this is an apple for my granddaughter-in-law. Why did you snatch it?" 4th elder Li glared at him. However, Li Nanheng couldn't see his glare. He held the apple in one hand and said with a smile, "She doesn't want to eat it. What's the point of pushing her around? Even if you want to see your granddaughter-in-law, you should give her some time to prepare herself." Suddenly, all 4 elders came. "With her personality and temper, I can tell how nervous she is right now. You guys can talk about whatever you want. You don't have to drag her. She can be more at ease." Li Nanheng really understood Feng Ling's current state of mind. She really didn't know how to deal with this kind of situation, nor did she know what to say or do so that the 4 elders wouldn't think that she was insensible. "Since when did we drag her? We saw that it was hard for her to take care of you alone, so we came to see you. Although we said we wanted to see you, we actually came to see our granddaughter-in-law." At this moment, 2nd elder Li also spoke. Seeing that Li Nanheng was chewing on the apple, he picked up another bunch of grapes from the fruit plate and handed it to Feng Ling. "Come, Feng Ling, eat the grapes. Eating more fruits is good for your health. You can't only take care of Nanheng. You have to take good care of yourself, okay?" "Thank you, Elder Li." Feng Ling looked at the bunch of grapes and didn't know if she should take it. Just as she raised her hand to take it, Li Nanheng stopped the grapes and slowly put them back into the fruit plate. "She doesn't eat grapes," Li Nanheng said as though he was her spokesperson. Feng Ling rarely eats things that are too sour. She eats pears, apples, bananas, strawberries and blueberries at most. She doesn't eat grapes, mangoes or durians. She doesn't eat bitter gourds or coriander. Among meat products she hates bacon the most. She doesn't look picky, but there are many things she doesn't like to eat. Don't feed her. Hearing Li Nanheng list out Feng Ling's likes and dislikes as though he was counting treasures, the four elders were enlightened. Feng Ling, on the other hand, was embarrassed and her face heated up. She wished she could find a hole to hide in. Oh, I see. Second elder Li immediately said with bright eyes, it's good that you don't eat it. Grapes and durians are too high in sugar. Eating too much is not good for your health. Feng Ling immediately smiled. Indeed, indeed. Li Junyan sat expressionlessly by the side. His three younger brothers would only follow behind him when he went out to establish his might. Now that he needed to coax his granddaughter-in-law, they were all useless. Who asked him to come here to discuss the sugar content of grapes with his granddaughter-in-law? Cough, cough. Li Junyan cleared his throat stiffly and forced himself into the topic. Feng Ling, if it's too tiring to take care of Nanheng alone, you don't have to force yourself. Tell us at any time. The Li family can send someone to help you. There's no need. Actually, he doesn't need me to take care of him most of the time. He doesn't need me to support him when he walks around at home. I just cook and clean up the room. I don't need help. I see. Then Nanheng won't feel sorry for you? There's no need to feel sorry for him. I'm willing. Willing? Li Junyan immediately glanced at Li Nanheng and saw the faint smile on Li Nanheng's lips. It was as though it was rare to hear Feng Ling express her feelings so seriously. Feng Ling said sincerely, Elder Li, I'm really willing to take care of him. And the four of you know Nanheng and I have been together for so many years. We're already used to it. This isn't exactly taking care of him. We're just accompanying each other. The four elders immediately said in unison, then why don't we find a day to get married? Feng Ling, then, Li Junyan asked tentatively, what do your grandparents think now? The four elders looked at Feng Ling with bright eyes. Back then, when they asked the Li family to marry the second miss of the Feng family cenotaph, they didn't expect Feng Ling to be the person involved. Later on, because of Feng Mingzhu's matter, the Feng and Li families more or less had some conflicts. The two families were not close to each other and almost cut off their daily contact. Chapter 1401. Later, when the Feng family met with an accident, although the Li family had come forward to express their condolences, the two elders of the Feng family were clearly not in the mood to pay attention to them. Now that the two children were basically bound, the six elders should ease their relationship. She just didn't know if the two elders of the Feng family had any thoughts about Li Nanheng now. Although Feng Ling and her grandparents had acknowledged each other, in the past few years she had been busy studying in England and in the company. In fact, she rarely accompanied the two elders. At most, they would have a meal together every time they returned to the Feng family to talk about the current situation. Furthermore, her grandparents knew a little about the relationship between Li Nanheng and her. They had never said anything, nor did they force them to be together, nor did they have any intention of breaking them up. They respected her choice. Besides, Feng Ling had always made her own decisions since she was young. If she really wanted to get married one day, she didn't need to consider whether others would agree or not. She answered truthfully, my grandparents won't interfere in these matters. The four elders said in unison, oh, then it seems like we should find time to go to New York to discuss the children's marriage with the two elders. Third elder Li, Feng Ling will be our granddaughter-in-law in the future. At least in the future, our relationship with the Feng family will be closer than before. The four of us will accompany each other like this. A large group of old fellows will travel around the world. Fourth elder Li, Feng Ling, this granddaughter-in-law, is reliable. I think the two elders of the Feng family don't have any objections to our Nanheng. This matter can be considered settled. Feng Ling's gaze swept across the faces of the four elders, wondering if they would really come up to persuade her to get married to Li Nanheng. Li Nanheng finally finished eating the apple slowly. It seemed that the topic of marriage was almost over. He put down the apple core and reached out to pull Feng Ling, who was sitting beside him, toward him. He put his long arm around her shoulder. We can get engaged first. We can marry when my eyes recover. I can't not even see my wife in a wedding dress when she marries me. In an instant, the four elders of the Li family stared at Feng Ling at the same time. Their eyes were filled with various meanings, but they were basically asking for her opinion. They were asking her if she could get engaged? Feng Ling felt a headache coming on. Feng Ling was a little embarrassed by the four elders of the Li family. Before she could speak, Li Nanheng suddenly patted her shoulder. "Leave it to me. You can go prepare lunch." Feng Ling immediately got up as if she had been pardoned and fled into the kitchen. Li Nanheng knew that even if Feng Ling wanted to agree in front of everyone, she wouldn't be able to say such words. In fact, Feng Ling had always been the kind of person who didn't speak much and was very silent. She seemed to be very good at hiding her thoughts, but in fact she was a very transparent person. He could feel her emotions and whether she was willing to be engaged or not. Seeing that Li Nanheng was so considerate as to let Feng Ling run away first, the four elders turned their eyes to him, waiting for him to give them an explanation. The moment Feng Ling stepped into the kitchen, Li Junyan's serious voice came from the sofa. "Li Nanheng." Li Nanheng curved his lips. "All right, I know what you're anxious about. She's destined to be your granddaughter-in-law. Even if she's been in the base for a few years, she's still a girl. How can she open her mouth if you force her like this? I'll answer for her. You can prepare for the engagement. The two elders of the Feng family can also contact you at any time." "Are you sure?" "Yes." Feng Ling was preparing lunch in the kitchen. At this moment she couldn't see the anxious expressions of the four elders of the Li family, as though they couldn't wait for 4 or 5 great-grandchildren to jump out of her and Li Nanheng's house to call them grandfathers. If it weren't for the fact that Li Nanheng had promised that he would work hard to use medicine to recover as soon as possible and get married early so that she could give birth to a great-grandson for them, the four elders would have poured a few bowls of deer whip soup into Li Nanheng's mouth and locked the two of them in the same room. Just as the elders outside were discussing how they should take turns to take care of the child if they had a daughter or a son, Feng Ling poked her head out of the kitchen and carefully interjected, May I ask if you can eat spicy food? Do you like light or strong food?" Third elder Li quickly let go of fourth elder Li's collar and walked out peacefully from the battlefield of who should help take care of the child first. He smiled at the head in front of the kitchen door. "We can eat anything. Light, salty, spicy, or sour. We're not old enough to eat soft things. We can eat anything. There's no need to prepare too much and it doesn't have to be too hard. We can eat anything. There's no need to prepare too much and it doesn't have to be too hard. We can eat anything." Feng Ling looked a little confused. She didn't know why the four elders were arguing so much. Li Nanheng sat on the sofa, hugged the blanket, and held his forehead to hold back his laughter. Then Li Junyan suddenly cleared his throat. "Let me tell you, Li Nanheng, the four of us are still alive. We don't know if we have long to live. If you dare to delay any longer and we can't hold our great-grandchildren, you can pack up and leave. Don't even think about inheriting the base or the Li family. If you can't give birth to any great-grandchildren, we'll deprive you of your inheritance rights. Before we die, we'll donate all our assets to charity organizations so that you can only rely on Feng Ling to support you in your next life. If she doesn't want you, you can go eat northwest wind by yourself." Feng Ling did not hear clearly in the kitchen, but she roughly heard that Li Nanheng would rely on her to support him in his next life. She was so shocked that her hands trembled and she almost cut her fingers with the kitchen knife. At this moment, third and fourth coughed a few times, indicating that Li Junyan should not be too ruthless. After all, he was their grandson. Li Junyan glared at them. "Do you have any objections?" "No objections, no objections. Look at him. He's not young anymore. He's already King 30 years old, but he's so fixated on Feng Ling. He's been staring at her for more than 10 years, but he hasn't given me a great-grandson. Have you eaten the food I asked Xiao Su to send over last time? If you haven't, I'll let Feng Ling stew it for you now. Deer penis, cattle penis, pig kidney, sheep kidney, all stew." Li Nanheng's face instantly darkened. "I have to clarify a very important point. Right now, I only have a problem with my eyes. I'm not injured where I shouldn't be. I don't care if you're injured or not. As long as my great-grandson doesn't come out, you'll have to feed me for a day." Li Nanheng held his face in pain. Who the F***ck would have thought that he, the dignified Li Nanheng, would actually be reduced to the point of having his kidney nourished. The key was that Feng Ling had been following the doctor's advice all day and not exercising strenuously. As long as the doctor didn't relent, she wouldn't even be kissed by him. Chapter 1402. In short, after my eyes recover, I'll marry her. I won't delay any longer. Li Junyan placed the crutch in his hand to the side and sat down on the sofa again. He said as though he was concluding the case, "Feng Ling has been with us for so many years. She has been by our side since she was a teenager and has guarded her for more than 10 years. Let's not talk about what we did back then. In the future, treat her well and don't abandon her. If you dare to use your heart to chase after her and abandon your wife and child after marrying her, the four of us will beat you to death with our crutches. Li Nanheng rubbed his forehead and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I believe you, I believe you. Although he knew the temperament of the four elders of the Li family and that they had always treated outsiders and their own people differently, this person had already taken Feng Ling's arm before marrying her. Should he be happy or worried? Elder Li, Feng Ling placed a cold dish on the dining table. I've prepared all the ingredients. They're all simple dishes that can be made in 10 minutes. There's also a soup that can be made in about 20 minutes. Do you have any other requests? There's no request. Any flavor is fine. Just be careful and don't tire yourself out. Li Nanheng gave Feng Ling, who was dumbfounded, a look for her to hide first. Feng Ling was indeed a little stunned by the elder's overly enthusiastic attitude. She nodded and turned to slip away. However, after lunch was prepared and placed on the dining table, Feng Ling couldn't hide in the kitchen all the time. When she came out, she saw the four elders standing by the dining table, staring at the dishes on the table and falling into deep thought. Feng Ling was quite confident in her cooking skills. She just treated it as them being surprised that she could actually cook. She took a glance over and walked to the sofa. She habitually helped Li Nanheng up, even though he didn't need help. He could already follow the route to the dining table. However, she could only find this opportunity to talk to him. When she helped him up from the sofa, she lowered her voice and asked, "What were you guys talking about just now?" "It's nothing. It's just that these four old men came over to force me to marry her. They want me to marry her immediately." Li Nanheng made an okay gesture at an angle that only she could see. "Don't worry, I've made it clear." Feng Ling's expression was inexplicable. What did he say clearly? Make it clear that you don't want to marry me for the time being. You might need some time to consider. Tell them not to force you. Even if you want to dump me one day, they won't ask a single word. Don't feel pressured. Feng Ling nodded. Her confused mood immediately relaxed. However, in the next second she was startled again. She instinctively asked, "Why should I dump him?" Who knows if the rare enthusiasm in the past 2 months will be short-lived and will be kicked away after a while. Li Nanheng had a strong expression on his face. "It's okay, I can bear it." Feng Ling, she knew that this man, who had become more and more slippery ever since he lost his sight, was deliberately trying to trick her, but she felt that she had never really expressed her attitude. No matter how he talked to the four elders of the Li family earlier, her original intention was that she could marry at any time. In any case, she was destined to be tied to this man for the rest of her life. Where else could she hide? "I'll marry." She said these 2 words very softly. The words that Li Nanheng had just spoken seemed to be abruptly stopped by something. The air seemed to be silent for 2 seconds. Feng Ling turned to look at him and saw that the man's face was filled with an undisguised smile. Satisfied. She continued to speak in a low voice. "All right, let's go eat." After a while, the 5 bachelors of the Li family and Feng Ling sat around the dining table. Looking at the steaming hot food on the table, there were Chinese dishes and various dishes commonly eaten in Los Angeles. The elders picked up the cutlery first. "Delicious, delicious. Good cooking. Feng Ling, this girl is a treasure. I really couldn't tell. Nanheng's appetite will be blessed in the future." Nowadays there aren't many young girls who can cook and make such delicious food. Although our Li family is in the United States, we still like to eat Chinese food. Feng Ling is actually so proficient in Chinese food. It seems that she has been greatly influenced by Nanheng. This kid has been eating Chinese food at home since he was young. The elders ate happily and suddenly began to talk about Li Nanheng's childhood. From when he was naughty to when grandfather Li kept chasing him in the backyard of the Li family with a belt, to when he was so naughty that he could tear down the newly built dog shed in the villa next door, to when his little friend's ball fell into the well, to when he was so daring that he could jump into such a deep well to pick up the ball, to when he was so naughty that he could climb up a tree to help the old man catch a bird that accidentally flew away, and even when he saw the police arresting a gangster on the street, he could stretch out his leg to trip the running gangster on the spot. After helping to catch the gangster, not only did he not receive any praise from the police, but he was even brought home and given a warning for several hours. All kinds of astonishing naughty deeds were recounted by the elders one by one. In the end, they said that they were really afraid that this child would be difficult to discipline in the future, so the 4 elders unanimously decided to throw him into the base to train. However, after entering the base for so many years, his nature still hadn't changed. He didn't expect that there would be a single seedling like Feng Ling in this pile of men. With Li Nanheng's temper in this world, only Feng Ling could control him. As for the others, he couldn't even be bothered to look at them. Feng Ling's eyebrows couldn't help twitching. She could only pretend that she didn't care much about Li Nanheng's past. She raised her hand to cover half of her face and resisted the trembling of her eyes and eyebrows. Li Nanheng listened to the words of the four elders with a cold expression. He turned his face and gave Feng Ling a facial expression, which meant that she didn't need to take their words seriously. Then he got up and fumbled for his phone, asking Feng Ling to help him dial the number of the supermarket downstairs. Feng Ling didn't understand and thought that there was not enough food to eat, so she dialed for him. However, after the call was connected, Li Nanheng asked the people at the supermarket downstairs to send a few bottles of wine up. He specially picked the kind that only sold for a few yuan and could be found everywhere in China, but in Los Angeles, it was extremely rare and expensive. It was worth dozens of dollars a bottle. After the wine was delivered, the few old men were still regretting that there was no wine to drink, but they were extremely satisfied and opened the wine. They drank and ate while chatting. When they were drunk, the Li family's fourth elder raised the extremely expensive erguotu in his hand and said to Li Nanheng, "Since we've decided on each other, we have to live a good life and love each other, understand?" Chapter 1403. Li Nanheng raised his glass and replied solemnly, "Understood." The four old men drank it. Li Nanheng made to drink as well, but Feng Ling held his hand and said softly, "The doctor told me not to drink." Feng Ling didn't know if it was an illusion, but when she finished speaking she clearly saw the four old men's eyes flickering with gratification and love. It was as though the grandson they had raised with great difficulty had finally found a backer who could help them control him. Right. Nanheng's body can't take it anymore. Let's drink by ourselves. Come. Let's drink. The few old men immediately bowed to each other and hugged each other. Feng Ling felt that something was wrong. Why did the four old men and Li Nanheng seem to have a tacit understanding? Just as she was thinking, Li Nanheng forcefully picked up a piece of meat and placed it in front of her. She immediately lowered her head to watch his chopsticks accurately place in her bowl. She then raised her eyes abruptly and saw that the man's eyes were not looking at her bowl. He was still intuitive and accurate. Li Nanheng's adaptability was really too strong. Most of the time, his intuition and super-fast speed of getting used to allowed him to not be affected by his eyes. It was natural for his life to be much more convenient. Sometimes she always felt that his eyes were not actually blind, but every time she looked at him she couldn't find the exact focal length of his eyes, which meant that he really couldn't see. After the meal the four old men were a little drunk. Feng Ling quickly took the initiative to send them downstairs. Thankfully the Li family's car and driver were waiting outside. After sending the four of them to the car, Feng Ling stood by the side of the road and waved her hand, asking the driver to send them back safely. Feng Ling went to the supermarket downstairs to buy some things and then went upstairs with the shopping bag. She walked out of the elevator and returned to the house. When she opened the door of the apartment, she saw that Li Nanheng was cleaning up the tableware on the table that she hadn't had time to clean up after the meal. Seeing that he was standing by the table and trying his best to help her with the housework, Feng Ling quickly put down the bag and walked over. "Don't do it. I'll put these in the dishwasher later. Tomorrow I'll tidy up the things in the apartment and bring them to my place. It'll be more convenient in the future." With that said, she hurriedly helped him into the bathroom to wash his hands. Because he couldn't see, his fingers and palms were more or less smeared with a lot of oil when he was tidying up the tableware. She dragged him to the tap to wash his hands, squeezed some water into his hands, and carefully helped him rub out white fragrant foam. Then she rinsed and dried his hands. Then he let go of her and turned to bring the things on the table to the dishwasher. Li Nanheng grabbed her hand and pulled her back without changing his expression. Feng Ling was caught off guard and bumped into the wall by the bathroom door. The man's breathing slowed, and then his chest, which was no longer as thin and had almost recovered, pressed her against the wall and tightened his grip around her waist. Feng Ling's footsteps were unsteady. She had just turned one foot away when the other was forced to turn over. She only had time to let out a gasp when Li Nanheng kissed her firmly. The man's mouth was mixed with the fragrance of a mint candy that he had casually thrown into his mouth after the meal. Recently he couldn't smoke or drink, and his body was filled with his most essential scent. It was clear and clean, and the smell of tobacco had been replaced by the fragrance of mint and medicine. The tip of his tongue with a hint of mint almost went deep into her throat. In a trance, Feng Ling felt that what this man really wanted to explore was not here. She raised her hand but he caught it and pressed it against the wall. His hand slid down the wall and then groped around, trying to reach into the back of her clothes. Feng Ling gritted her teeth and grabbed Li Nanheng's wrist, pushing it away a little. What did I say? Bear with it, you can't mess around now. I can't help it. Li Nanheng pressed close to her face and breathed in the scent of her body. There seemed to be light in his eyes through the mist, and there were 2 clusters of flames in the depths of his pupils. Just listen to the doctor's words. Don't keep it in your heart. After a pause he said, I've said it before. Marry me. You'll be my wife sooner or later. Don't be shy in. Wuxia. Feng Ling pushed him and turned to leave without saying a word. Before she could take 2 steps, she was brought back by a strong force from behind. Then the world spun, and Li Nanheng picked her up, threw her onto the sofa, and pressed her down without hesitation. He tucked her under his body and rubbed the tip of his nose intimately against hers. His lower body, which was obviously no longer able to hide, was pressing against her. It was a declaration of how much he had endured for the past few days. It was just 2 hugs and he was already unable to control himself. Feng Ling's ears heated up and she shouted in a low voice, Tomorrow. Tomorrow the doctor will come and check again. If the doctor says it's okay, I'll take off my clothes and lie on the bed, okay? With that she pushed him down and sat up. Now that your strength has recovered, you're no longer the one who can't even beat a finger of mine. You're starting to want to make the decision again, aren't you? Let me tell you, as long as the doctor doesn't give in, I definitely won't. Wait for the doctor's permission and take the initiative? Feng Ling's expression instantly froze. Then, the night in the Washington resort appeared in her mind. At that time she was actually halfway awake. At that time she seemed to be very active. The scene repeatedly flashed in her mind, causing her ears to heat up. All right, your eyes haven't been applied today. If you delay any longer, the effect of yesterday's medicine will wear off. Feng Ling quickly pushed him away. I'll clean up first. I'll go back to my apartment to apply the medicine. Feng Ling placed everything on the dining table into the dishwasher and closed the door. She listened to the movements inside, but at the same time she felt that she could strangely hear Li Nanheng's breathing and movements as he sat on the sofa in the living room. Even the slightest movement was exceptionally clear, as though it was scratching her sensitive nerves. Especially when Li Nanheng had just returned from England and forced himself on her in the car on the mountain, he had always respected her and never forced her. Even though he looked like a particularly ruffian and gangster-like man, making people feel that she must have been bullied too much, in fact, he had always respected her. Chapter 1404. She held her breath, but there was a fiery thing in her heart that kept jumping here and there, leaping here and there. We've known each other for more than 10 years, and we've spent the most important moments of our lives together. We've saved each other's lives in the most difficult times, and we've left sweat on each other's bodies time and time again. We've hugged, kissed, and loved each other deeply. We've never given up on each other. If it weren't for the doctor's advice to pay attention to his health, how could she not want to go further? The person she loved was right in front of her. She was not a teenage girl who didn't understand the world. Feng Ling took out the washed dishes and tidied them up. When she went out, she saw that Li Nanheng seemed to have calmed down and seemed to be used to being rejected by her. He didn't say anything but just sat there waiting for her, like a child who didn't get candy but had no choice but to stand there and wait. The next morning the doctor arrived. After checking all aspects, the doctor kept nodding. Not bad. Every time you come for a rehabilitation checkup, there are new breakthroughs. Mr. Li's physical fitness is really not comparable to that of ordinary people. He's too strong. As long as his eyes are not affected, even if a few people come to fight with him, they may not be able to defeat him. Really? Some people even say that I can't beat him. Li Nanheng sat by the table, casually buttoned his cuffs, and then fastened his collar. He said these words to Feng Ling indifferently. The doctor sat down and chatted with Li Nanheng for a while. He didn't see Feng Ling again for a long time. When he turned back, he noticed that she had come back with something and asked, "What are you doing? Moving?" The apartment above is his. I'm moving down some things that can be used, Feng Ling replied and continued to go out. In fact, there weren't many things, but she had to sort them out. She went to the cabinet and took out all the things that occupied the space and arranged them one by one. When she finished all the examinations for Li Nanheng and told him how to recuperate and consolidate his health in the next few months, she got up and saw that Feng Ling took out 2 golden boxes from the cabinet and piled them against the wall, waiting to put them in another place. The doctor's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of the contents of the box. He walked over and looked at it carefully. At this moment, Feng Ling stood up from her squatting position. When she turned back, she met the doctor's eyes. She paused, lowered her head, and instantly saw the 2 boxes of supplements. Before she had time to be embarrassed, the doctor coughed and then turned to change the medicine for Li Nanheng's eyes as if nothing had happened. At this moment, Feng Ling also remembered that she had to be embarrassed. She quickly put away the 2 boxes. Just now, she was in a hurry to tidy up the cabinet and didn't notice that she had taken these things out. After a while, the doctor came over to pour himself a glass of water. As he poured the water, he looked at Feng Ling, who was about to come over to receive a glass of water. He did not walk away. Even when he saw Feng Ling receiving the water, he still stood by the side with an expression as though nothing had happened. His voice was so low that only she could hear it. Actually, based on Mr. Li's physical condition, it's no longer a big deal. I just keep reminding you to be careful. Feng Ling turned to look at him. Seeing that she didn't seem to understand what he meant, the doctor coughed in a low voice. I mean, as long as you pay attention to one thing and don't let Mr. Li be too tired, it's okay for the 2 of you to do something, but you have to pay attention to moderation. You have to pay attention to moderation. After hearing this, Feng Ling withdrew her gaze and silently closed the small door of the water dispenser as though she hadn't heard anything. Then she calmly took a sip of water and turned to leave without saying a word. In the afternoon, Li Nanheng didn't know what was wrong with Feng Ling. Although she usually didn't speak much, she was especially quiet this afternoon. For example, he asked, "Where did I put the slippers just now? Did you put them away?" Feng Ling didn't answer. She took the slippers over, placed them by his feet, and then ran away as though the soles of her feet were smeared with oil. For example, he said, "My eyes are a little itchy today. Can you take off the medicine in advance? I feel the most comfortable when I don't apply medicine." Feng Ling didn't say anything. She adjusted the small hairdryer to the most soothing and cool mode and gently blew around his eyes for a while. When he didn't feel so itchy anymore, she slipped away again. In the evening, when Li Nanheng was eating, he felt that the taste was a little strange. "Is there something on your mind today?" Usually, Feng Ling's cooking was moderate and rarely tasted wrong. Although today's food was not bad and the taste was not much different, it was indeed a little salter than usual, which meant that she was thinking about something when she added the salt. Feng Ling glanced at him silently. Was this man's sensitivity so high? When she was preparing dinner, the iPad screen next to her didn't display a menu today, but some related topics about how to make a man feel more comfortable at that time, and various similar topics. She looked them up, and at this moment, her mind was filled with the actions she had prepared hundreds of times in her mind to do to him. She just didn't know how to do the first step. The sky turned dark. Li Nanheng went to take a shower and change his clothes. In the past month, his hair had grown a lot, and his ink-black hair was still dripping with water. He casually shook his hair. Because he had taken off the medicine in front of his eyes before taking a shower, he felt that his eyes were relaxed and comfortable. He simply sat on the sofa with his eyes closed and casually pulled the blanket over, planning to sit on the sofa and take a nap. After all, it was not time to sleep yet, and he still needed to apply ice before going to bed at night. Just as Li Nanheng was about to fall asleep, he suddenly heard footsteps approaching. He knew it was Feng Ling who had just come out of the shower. She was not wearing shoes and was barefoot. He frowned and woke up. "I was wondering why you weren't wearing." Before he could finish speaking, he was suddenly shocked by Feng Ling's movement. At this moment, his nose smelled the fragrance of shower gel and shampoo. Then, a woman wearing only a loose t-shirt on her upper body and nothing on her lower body, not even wearing underwear, spread her slender legs and directly sat on his lap. Ching-Ching's baby has 4 days off. Ching-Ching accompanied the child to play outside for 4 days. It's true that holidays are more tiring than working days. I'm so tired that I'm about to collapse. After tomorrow night's update, see you on Weibo. By the way, I'll shout myself hoarse and beg for monthly votes here. It's rare to get double monthly votes. Chapter 1405. Only a fool would let go of the person in his arms who had suddenly taken the initiative to deliver herself to him. Even though Li Nanheng's mind was a little dazed, he subconsciously quickly put his legs down to prevent her from falling down again. Feeling that the man's reaction was to let her sit more steadily, Feng Ling looked at the man's face and was silent for a while. She was too embarrassed to say the words that were about to come out of her mouth. However, just as Li Nanheng was about to ask her what she was doing, Feng Ling had already held his hand that he had just raised to hold her. Sitting on his lap, she lowered her head and gently kissed his warm and dry palm. This kiss went from the palm to the tip of his finger, and then to the tip of his finger. Then Li Nanheng felt that she seemed to pause for a moment. After hesitating for a second, she still gently bit the tip of his finger. Feng Ling's teeth were white and neat, but in fact, there were two unruly little canine teeth hidden. At this moment she was gently biting him with her little canine teeth and even accidentally rubbed her tongue. It was soft. The feeling was transmitted from his fingers to the sensitive nerve endings. Li Nanheng's body trembled reflexively and he was about to pull his hand away, but she grabbed his hand and did not let go. She bit his fingertips harder and when she let go, the teeth marks on his fingertips were clearly visible. "Feng, you..." Before Li Nanheng could speak, his lips were suddenly sealed by her soft lips. On his thigh, the woman was inextricably pressed against him. Although the two of them were sitting on the sofa, their lower bodies were intertwined in an intimate and dangerous position. Separated by a thin material, Li Nanheng could not hide this situation in less than 2 seconds. Feng Ling seemed to be not used to this position. She tried her best to retract her legs, which made him feel even more stimulated. "Li Nanheng, yesterday was my birthday. You didn't give me a present." Feng Ling pressed against him tightly and kissed him until he was stunned. After he could not speak, she leaned close to his ear and whispered. Li Nanheng's brows trembled. "Yesterday those 4 old men came to make a scene. Later, I wanted to take them out for a walk, but every time after eating, I didn't have the appetite to eat cakes and other desserts. At night, when I wanted to go out, they said that it was too windy and I couldn't go out, so It's okay. If you didn't remind me, I wouldn't have remembered it was yesterday. One more day won't make a difference. Then what do you want?" Under Feng Ling's gaze, even though Li Nanheng couldn't see how red her face was at this moment and how much tension and uneasiness were hidden under the calm surface in her eyes, he could guess that this was the first time she had taken the initiative to do such a thing. Although she looked like a wolf and a tiger, she must be panicking inside, so he didn't deliberately provoke her. He only asked softly and calmly, in case he said something wrong and scared away this little Feng Ling who had jumped into the dragon's pool and tiger's den. After all, he couldn't see right now. If she really ran away, he might not be able to catch her. Feng Ling felt inexplicably calmer under Li Nanheng's calm gaze. "Then give me a gift today." Li Nanheng was still extremely calm. "And what gift?" Feng Ling did not speak at first but lowered her head to look at his Adam's apple. She remembered that she had bitten here in the warm pool in the resort. Later, for some reason, she kept wanting to bite him. That time, when she bit his Adam's apple, this man seemed to have groaned a few times. It was clearly a sensitive place for him. She leaned down and suddenly bit his neck, then gently bit his Adam's apple. Sure enough, the man who was pressed against the sofa by her stiffened all over. In less than a second, his muscles tightened, and the hand that had just held her waist tightened. Feng Ling turned her head slightly and pressed against his neck, which was gradually heating up. "I don't know how to make it comfortable, but Before she could finish speaking, Li Nanheng pressed her firmly into his arms. Feng Ling's lips hit his neck, and then the man suddenly carried her up. He bent down to lift her up and carried her horizontally. He took a few steps toward the bedroom and did not stop for a moment. He entered the bedroom and kicked the door shut. Then he placed Feng Ling on the bed, pushed her into the soft blanket and firmly covered her. With Li Nanheng's figure and height, he had long recovered to a certain extent. She had always treated him as a weak patient who could not even kill a chicken to take care of him for so long. It was probably because she had been taking care of him for so long that she subconsciously felt that Li Nanheng was weaker than her. However, on the contrary, this man had never been weaker than her. For example, right now, she could completely feel the strength in the man's arms and the man's firm and hard chest imprisoning her. She knew that she had barged into his territory tonight. Right now, even if she wanted to stop, it was impossible. It was also because she had already made preparations in advance. The man locked her on the bed, and his hot breath brushed against her neck. She was forced to stare at the man's black eyes in this face-to-face position. In the bedroom without the lights on, the man's eyes were very bright. They were so bright that it was as though he could see the fine sweat on her nose due to her nervousness. It was as though he could see the softness in her eyes. "Why do you suddenly want to do it again? Didn't you desperately escape from me yesterday and warn me again and again to restrain yourself?" Feng Ling's lips moved and then she pursed them. Even though he couldn't see her, she still subconsciously tilted her head away. "The doctor said that it's okay, but I can't let you be too tired and then I still have to restrain myself. I can't be too long, can't be too long?" Li Nanheng seemed to be amused. "All right, under normal circumstances after holding it in for so long, I might not be able to do it until dawn. Seeing that the doctor has relented, let's end it before dawn?" Feng Ling. "Li Nanheng, pay attention to your body." "What's wrong with my body?" As the man spoke, he pushed against her as nastily as before. I haven't touched you for a long time. I've been weak in front of you for a few months and you really think I'm a little gigolo? If I don't make you cry tonight, I'm afraid the name Li Nanheng will be written backwards. Feng Ling's face heated up. In the end, she forced herself to say something, but when the words reached her mouth, the man pushed against her again and she couldn't say anything. Speak. Li Nanheng slowly bent down and leaned closer. When he spoke, his lips were almost pressed against hers. Who gave you the guts to come out and seduce me without wearing anything down there? Chapter 1406. Speak. Li Nanheng slowly leaned down and leaned closer. When he spoke, his lips were almost pressed against hers. Who gave you the guts to come out and tease me without wearing anything? Feng Ling originally wanted to answer that she had checked the various suggestions of people online and said that men like this kind of thing. That was why she had saved the lower half of her body after showering. But before he could open his mouth, his voice was suddenly sealed. The man's kiss was different from every previous kiss. In the terrifying and suffocating entanglement, accompanied by the man's long-suppressed desire, all of her senses were infused with such a fiery kiss. Her body could not help but gradually heat up. Don't move. Let me do it. She remembered that she had to take the initiative. She raised her hand and was about to unbutton his clothes when the man spoke urgently and vaguely. At the same time, he held her hand and quickly unbuttoned his home clothes one by one. Then he pulled her hand up and pressed it against his chest. Due to the heavy blow in Israel, his originally flat muscles and skin had many uneven marks. Because it had only healed a few months ago, it was not the best time to have a scar removal operation. These scars would need at least 2 to 3 years to be removed. Touching the scars, Feng Ling's heart ached. She took the initiative to circle behind him and hugged his back tightly. Sensing her actions, the man panted and asked with a smile, "Are these scars very sexy? Touching them here and there?" It was not just sexy. When she thought about how this man had managed to survive in such a dangerous situation, and how he was able to stand in front of her and press her down on the bed with his strong muscles, she felt extremely sexy. She did not speak. She raised her head and kissed his chin, then kissed his lips. All the active responses caused the man's restraint to collapse to the limit. He abruptly pressed her under his body and pressed his forehead against hers. He said hoarsely, "How dare you tease me like this? When you cry, pay attention to your throat. Don't shout until it's hoarse. Do you love me?" Answer. She couldn't recover from the surging tide of passion. She could only rely on her instincts to answer a vague word hoarsely. Love. Li Nanheng's first reaction was to not believe his ears. A few seconds later, joy came like a storm. He suddenly carried her up and went straight to the bathroom. Feng Ling was carried on his shoulder. Earlier, her soul was almost scattered. She barely took a breath and said, "Slow down, Li Nanheng, slow down. There's a sofa in front. I can't see it. Don't bump into it." However, the man was already familiar with all the distances and positions in this house. He accurately circled around the sofa and entered the bathroom door. When she was pressed against the bathroom wall by the man, Feng Ling could only hear the man repeating under the warm shower, "I love you, Feng Ling, I love you." Time passed bit by bit. Before Feng Ling's consciousness dissipated, the only thing she could think of was that she was glad that she didn't give him the nutritious food the Li family sent. Otherwise, her life would have been lost here. How was he injured? It was clearly just a few scars on his body. Anything else? He was completely unaffected. In the early morning, the sun slowly rose from the east and cast a bright light through the gaps in the curtains. On the large bed in the bedroom, the clothes and bedding were messily folded. Finally, the man's heavy breathing and the woman's weak cat-like moans gradually calmed down. Li Nanheng was still on top of her. He took a shower midway and then continued several times. He was reluctant to lie down, as if being close to her like this was enough for him to fall asleep comfortably. Feng Ling half opened her eyes tiredly and frowned. "What's wrong?" Li Nanheng asked softly. Feng Ling did not answer. Using the light in the room, she sized up the man on top of her bit by bit. When Li Nanheng's eyes were not so cold and sharp, he looked very calm and handsome. When his facial features were soft, he was so good-looking that it made people want to lean against him. However, he often had a cold, "don't provoke me" attitude and expression, so his brows were always cold and sharp, making people not dare to approach him. Especially when he was very good at looking at Li Nanheng's brows and straight nose. She looked carefully and seriously. After a long time, she raised her hand and touched Li Nanheng's face. "I thought it was about time for dawn to come and I should sleep for a while. The man lowered his head and bit her lips, saying harshly, "But it's clear that you don't want to sleep." Li Nanheng was like a lion that had been hungry for a long time and finally had meat again. This night, from the initial intensity, gradually changed from surging desire to true love. "You can't take it anymore? Didn't you say that I'm so weak that I can't even beat you? Am I so delicate?" Feng Ling subconsciously wanted to grab the bedsheets as though she wanted to break free, but the moment she moved, the man pressed her back down with his hands on her waist and kissed her heavily. The noon sun shone through the gap in the curtains and onto the messy large bed in the bedroom. Feng Ling's eyelashes fluttered and she slowly opened her eyes. After a few seconds of confusion, her eyes finally focused. She felt a heavy object on her body. She lowered her head and saw that it was indeed that familiar arm. She wanted to turn over, but the sleeping man pulled her into his arms again. Li Nanheng's upper body was naked outside the quilt. He closed his eyes and held her head with one hand and her waist with the other. "Sleep for a while more." Feng Ling was caught off guard and bumped into the man's chest. Her entire face was facing him. She quickly struggled and said, "It's almost noon. You haven't eaten yet. You haven't applied medicine to your eyes. You forgot to ice them last night." She had just struggled to get off the bed, but before her feet touched the ground, the man suddenly hugged her from behind and she fell back onto the large bed. Then Li Nanheng pulled her into his arms and hugged her tightly again. "It's all right. Sleep first. These few hours won't matter. But, be good." The man stroked her head comfortingly. Clearly, although he had a good night, he was indeed sleepy. After all, he had been recuperating for so long and was used to sleeping early and waking up early. He suddenly didn't sleep for the whole night. Right now, he really needed to hug her to make up for his sleep. "Aren't you going to eat?" Chapter 1407. "I'm not hungry. Let's sleep first. We'll talk when we wake up." He insisted on holding her in his arms. Feng Ling's head was tilted back by this man, and her entire body was firmly in his arms. She did not have much strength. After being squeezed for an entire night, it would be strange if she had any strength. Seeing that he insisted, she simply let herself be in his arms and closed her eyes again. But why was this man pressing against her as if he was threatening her? She carefully avoided him, but he rubbed against her again, insisting on sticking to her. In the end, she was afraid that something would happen again, so she simply stopped moving and chose to sleep. Seeing that she was not moving, the man kissed the white skin on the back of her neck as if he was a little regretful. He wanted to say that he still wanted to continue, but seeing that her body was so weak, he couldn't bear to say that. There was still a long way to go. Since she had already agreed to marry him, there was no hurry. They could continue at night. Li Nanheng hugged her tighter in his arms, brushed aside her long hair by her ear, kissed her white ear and said softly, "Sweet dreams." Feng Ling rubbed her face against his arm, but there was no reaction. Clearly she was about to fall asleep. Li Nanheng called a nearby hotel to send food over. After receiving the food, he went to the dining table and placed it on the table one by one. Then he tested the temperature with his hand, scooped some pork rib soup and brought it into the bedroom. The light in the room was not turned on. Right now, it did not matter to him whether the light was on or not. He walked back to the bed and could still smell some hormones in the bedroom, which stimulated Li Nanheng's sensitive nerve endings after sleeping with her in his arms for a few hours. Hearing the sound, Feng Ling seemed to have regained some consciousness. She curled up under the quilt and half closed her eyes, looking unwilling to wake up. It was not until Li Nanheng's hand took her out of the quilt and kept kissing her, from her hair to the corner of her eyes, and patted her face to tell her to get up and eat something that she suddenly woke up. He couldn't see. How could he get food for her? However, when she turned her eyes, she saw that it was a takeaway box from a nearby 5-star hotel. She paused, opened her mouth and said in a hoarse voice, "You brought it in just like that? What if it's scalded? What's hot?" "No matter how hot it is, you have to let him eat something first. That's what you call physical exhaustion." Li Nanheng put down the bowl and touched her cheek. "Eat something before you sleep or your stomach will be uncomfortable." Feng Ling really didn't have much strength, but seeing that he had specially asked for food from the hotel, he was afraid that she would be hungry. No matter how tired she was, she couldn't bear to push him away. She took the bowl and spoon, ate a few mouthfuls and drank some soup. Then she put the bowl aside. "Leave it here. Don't walk around." She was so sleepy that she even forgot to help him apply the medicine. She lay down and was about to sleep. The man chuckled and bent down to kiss her lips, which still had the taste of pork rib soup. All right, I won't wander around. I'll accompany you in bed. Feng Ling thought he meant to sleep with her, so she answered vaguely and went back to sleep. Who knew that the man would directly take off his clothes and lie back under the blanket? Behind him he easily, Feng Ling really couldn't take it anymore. Amidst the ups and downs of the quilt, she spoke hoarsely. Boss? The man's low and hoarse voice was close to her ear. Feng Ling closed her eyes and wanted to say something, but because of the man's hoarse voice in her ear, she couldn't say anything. Be good. I promise this will be the last time today. Before her consciousness completely dissipated, this was another promise from Li Nanheng, the liar. When Feng Ling opened her eyes again, it was already dusk outside. She flipped over from under the blanket and sat up. Because she hadn't done it for a long time, the pain there caused her to suck in a breath of cold air when she stood up. After a long while she finally slowed down and walked out. Her body had actually been washed. At the very least, Li Nanheng was very careful about this. He wouldn't let her sleep uncomfortably with her body sticky all over. Li Nanheng wasn't in the bedroom. She opened the door and walked out, only to see the man sitting in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on his head, making his entire body glow. Hearing the sound of the bedroom door, the man turned his head slightly. Hearing the sound, Feng Ling looked at him for a moment and walked over. She was about to reach out to help him back to the sofa, but when she raised her hand, her expression froze. On her ring finger there was a platinum ring. When she got up earlier she didn't notice it. Now that she saw this ring, she was stunned for a few seconds and asked, "This ring?" When the old man came over yesterday he secretly stuffed it into my hand when he was in the kitchen. Speaking up to hear, Li Nanheng sighed with a smile. He also didn't let me tell the other 3 old men. Feng Ling looked at the ring on her ring finger and felt that this ring was very old. It should be a very expensive and popular platinum ring from many years or even decades ago. Although it was a little old, she must have hired a craftsman to polish the surface of the ring until it was as smooth as new. It was clean, bright and very beautiful. So this ring is the Li family's heirloom? Feng Ling asked teasingly. No, it said that my grandfather and grandmother wore it when they got married. After the old lady passed away, no one noticed when the old man took off her ring and kept it by his side for so many years, Li Nanheng said mildly. After the old lady left, this ring was equivalent to the old man's life. Now that he asked me to hand this ring to you, I don't think he has any intention of completely binding me to the Li family. He is just apologizing to you and expressing the Li family's sincerity. Apologize for what? After Feng Ling finished speaking, she suddenly recalled how she was chased out of the base. She paused. After thinking for a moment, she said, I understand. With that, she leaned over and endured the pain in her lower body. She looked at the man sitting on the carpet by the window and reached out to show 2 in front of him. Li Nanheng, how many is this? The man searched for her voice and fixed his eyes in her direction. What? I said, how many is this? My hand in front of you. Feng Ling turned her fingers into 3. Li Nanheng, you still can't see it? Nonsense. Then how did you carry me to take a shower, call the hotel for takeout, and even put the ring on my finger? Today's roller coaster ride, I'm sure everyone knows where to look, right? I'm frantically hinting that if it's not in the main account, everyone can directly go to the sub-account. In any case there will definitely be one. Ching Ching is really working hard to satisfy everyone, and then I'll ask for monthly votes. Chapter 1408. The air fell into a moment of silence. Feng Ling looked at him. Li Nanheng, if you dare to lie to me after your eyes have recovered, you know my temper. It's not healed really? Li Nanheng raised his face, his expression calm and serious. She paused, not believing him. She stared at him for a long while, then leaned over to his eyes. She stared straight into his eyes and raised her hand to touch his eyes. However, the man raised his hand and pulled her into his arms. The moment she stumbled into his arms, she immediately cried out, You still say you can't see? I really can't see. The man didn't let go after hugging her. He sat on the carpet and hugged her into a ball. He lowered his head and kissed her on the cheek. Occasionally, I can see some blurry images with the help of the light. It's so blurry that I can't see it clearly. For example, right now there's a lot of light in the window. I can see a figure standing in the dark, but when you raise your hand I can't see it clearly. Then how did you get the hotel takeout? The number you recently dialed is K. I touched my phone, dialed the nearest number and asked K to help me contact a nearby hotel. So that's how it is. The man lowered his head and kissed her forehead comfortingly. You want me to recover my eyesight as soon as possible and marry me? Why are you in such a hurry to marry me? Feng Ling did not speak, but Li Nanheng rarely gave others pressure. He could act as usual as though there was nothing wrong with his eyes, so in the past few months, she often forgot that he could not see anything. It wasn't easy for her to catch some clues that her eyes could see, but in the end it was not. That's right. He had been groping around this house for several months. It was not difficult to carry her to the bathroom, and he could even find her ring finger. Since you can see some blurry images, it means that your eyes have improved. Find time to go to the hospital again. The doctors who occasionally come for a health check can't bring equipment. Go to the hospital for another check. All right. Li Nanheng heard the restraint in her tone and raised his hand to touch her head. He was the one who should be comforted, but now he had to comfort her instead. Coincidentally, Feng Ling's legs were still sore, so she simply let herself lean in his arms and did not get up. The evening sun was also warm. She narrowed her eyes and leaned in his arms for a while before feeling sleepy again. In the end, he accidentally fell asleep again. When she woke up again, Feng Ling was in the bedroom. Hearing Li Nanheng's voice in the living room, she got up and walked out to see that he was answering the phone. Yes, Dr. Yurko contacted me a month ago. Some time ago, he was accompanying a seriously ill elder in the sanatorium and has been on leave. Recently, he returned to New York and had a few important eye tissue surgeries. He just took the time to arrange a week of free time. I'll go over and give it a try. You don't have to come over. You're only here to visit at a time like this. My wife still has to prepare food for you. It's enough for her to take care of me. Feng Ling listened for a while and walked over. Coincidentally, Li Nanheng had hung up the phone. Wait? He asked, turning to her at the sound of her footsteps. Who called? Qin Sighting. Li Nanheng handed her a cup of milk that he had just warmed. When Feng Ling gratefully received it, he said, Qin Sighting knows an internationally renowned ophthalmologist, but it's very difficult to make an appointment with this doctor. Because an elder in his family passed away not long ago, he hasn't been out for a consultation. He only recently resumed work. Mo Jingshan recently contacted the president of their hospital and specially gave me Dr. Yorko's time for the next week. Is this doctor very good at treating eyes? It shouldn't be bad. A month ago, I accepted the suggestion of a doctor in Los Angeles and contacted this famous Dr. Yorko. However, at that time, something had just happened to his family and he really didn't have time to come, so I didn't force him. Li Nanheng heard the soft sound of her drinking milk and smiled. Recently, Qin Sighting and Mo Jingshan have used their connections to make a decision. We'll leave for New York tomorrow. I'll go meet Dr. Yorko and you can go back to New York to visit the Feng family. Yesterday, Jinwan said on the phone that she was coming. I didn't want her to go abroad with the child. She's pregnant recently, so I didn't let her come. What you said today, if she finds out, she might really think that I don't want to entertain them personally. Feng Ling drank most of the milk and glanced at him. I think you don't want to see Mr. Mo and Mrs. Mo bring their 2 children to show off their love in front of you. Li Nanheng sneered but did not explain. Instead, he turned his head and kissed her ear. When she was about to dodge to the side, he held her waist and pressed her into the sofa. Then hurry up and give birth to 1 or 2 for me. If Mo Jingshan dares to show off in front of me with his wife and children, I'll throw our children's diapers on his face. Let's see if he still dares to show off. Feng Ling, she imagined the scene and then thought of Mr. Mo's expressionless face. A chill ran down her spine and she quickly pushed him away. It's not easy for Mr. Mo and Jinwan to have such a peaceful little happiness. Is there a need for you to be so sour? Besides, Dr. Qin isn't married and has no children. It's not like you're the last one. What's the rush? Li Nanheng sneered on the spot. Then I'm afraid you don't know that when Shi Nianj ruthlessly slept with him and left him for America, she already had the Qin family seed in her stomach. When she returned to High City, she was already the mother of a 3-year-old girl. Do you know how many years she hid it from Qin Sighting? Qin Sighting was the first to become a father. Feng Ling looked incredulous. Why haven't I heard of it? With Shi Nianj's personality, even if she lost her teeth, she would swallow her own blood. She even hid it from Qin Sighting for so long. How would others know? Even when Liqing can make a son out of Wen Linhan. Do you think I'm sour? Li Nanheng said as he pinched her waist and pressed her into his arms. I'm already 30 years old. It's 31. Feng Ling still had the time to correct him. Li Nanheng's face darkened. So I've been by your side for so many years. I've had you in my heart since your chest was not fully developed. I've been treating you for more than 10 years, but in the end, I'm actually the last one to give birth to a child. Chapter 1409. How could such a thing be counted as being at the bottom? Feng Ling was dumbfounded. The air fell silent again. I've had a dream since I was young. I want to find a woman I like, give birth to a son or daughter and throw them to the four elders. I want them to feel the familial love of 2 generations apart. Let's see if they still dare to slap their great-grandchildren with a belt. Li Nanheng covered his eyes and shook his head after a while. He said solemnly, I wonder if they can live to that day. Feng Ling. With that, Li Nanheng let go of her and stood up to walk to the floor-to-ceiling window. In the darkness he faced out of the window. His back view was surrounded by a trace of heavy helplessness, tolerance and forbearance, as though the man covered in blood in the Israeli river was slowly looking up at the sky with heavy footsteps. Then he symbolically shook his head to show that his heart was really very vicissitude. Feng Ling held her forehead and was defeated. Give birth, didn't I not use any contraceptive measures last night? You've already put it in. I don't plan on taking any medicine. I'll just leave it to fate. If I'm really pregnant, I'll give birth. You agreed just like that? Qin Shuk looked in disbelief at Feng Ling, who had always been very calm when it came to relationships. She actually agreed to have a child. Feng Ling and Li Nanheng had already rushed from Los Angeles to New York for 2 days. Li Nanheng was still waiting for the surgery at Dr. York's place. This doctor was indeed very reliable. Yesterday he only took a morning to confirm that he could be cured. He only needed to undergo a simple minor surgery. After the surgery he could be discharged in about 4 to 3 days. This was equivalent to the week that Mr. Mo and Dr. Qin had fought for him. Li Nanheng could finish the eye surgery and return to Los Angeles after leaving the hospital. However, Li Nanheng did not ask her to stay in the hospital. He only told her to return to the Feng family or Qin Shuk to wait for his news. Coincidentally, Qin Shuk knew that she had returned to New York, so she rushed to the hospital and brought Feng Ling back to the company. It had been a long time since she returned to the company. Right now, this place was no longer completely under her management. When Feng Ling entered, she even wore a mask to prevent the employees from recognizing her. She successfully entered Qin Shuk's office. After all, he's about to undergo eye surgery. He needs to be in a good mood during the recovery period. Besides, this kind of thing is up to fate. If I still take contraceptive pills at this time, I'm afraid he'll jump off the operating table and strangle me. Feng Ling sat on the sofa in the office and casually flipped through the company documents. After a while she felt a headache. How did she survive in this pile of documents in the past few years? It was really not suitable for her. She would get a headache if she looked at it for a while, and her eyes would probably hurt if she looked at it for a while longer. Now that you're willing to stay by his side, he can't wait to dote on you like you're his sweetheart. How would he dare to pinch you? Qin Shuk chuckled. However, I suggest that you consider having a child after his eyes recover. Otherwise, he won't even be able to help the child change diapers. I'm not pregnant now. I didn't think too much about it. Besides, I'll be pregnant for 10 months. If I'm really pregnant one day, maybe if he's happy, the blood clot that oppresses the optic nerve will be stimulated away. As Feng Ling spoke, she put down the documents in her hands. In fact, she was just joking casually. She then said seriously, now I'm at the age to get married and start a family. In the past, I could squander a few more years because I was young. Now that I think about it, I'm really wasting my time. Li Nanheng is like a lone wolf. In this world, I'm afraid only you won't be completely swallowed by him. Ordinary people really can't suppress someone like him. Really? Feng Ling curved her lips and recalled that Li Nanheng had jokingly called her little wolf girl a few times. Wolves were loyal by nature, just like her loyalty to 11 Base and Li Nanheng. If she was destined to be with wolves since she was young, she really didn't mind having a little wolf cub with Li Nanheng. At this moment, Feng Ling's phone rang. The call was from the Feng family. She glanced at it and picked it up. Matriarch Feng's voice came from the other end of the phone. Good granddaughter, you're back in New York, aren't you? Coincidentally, Grandma has something to tell you. Should we look for you or will you come home? I'm with Shuk. I can go home directly. Feng Ling heard Matriarch Feng's voice. Although they had only known each other for a few years, she was still very close to this grandmother. Her voice became much gentler. Is it something important? It's nothing much. It's mainly because the Wen family heard about little Momo and sent someone over to ask for the child. Although they're from the Wen family, Didn't you say that Wen Liqing specially handed the child to you and didn't send him back to the Wen family? This means that there's something wrong, so we didn't dare to hand the child over to them. Recently, the Wen family has been sending people over frequently. I'm worried. Coincidentally, you're back. Feng Ling was silent for a moment. I understand. I'll go back later. What's wrong? Seeing that Feng Ling had put down the phone and was about to leave, Qin Shuk sat behind a pile of documents on the desk and looked up at her. I'll go take a look at little Momo's problem. Help me keep an eye on the hospital. All right, if there's any news from Li Nanheng, he'll definitely contact you immediately. Qin Shuk gave her a "Don, T bully me" a single expression. The driver is downstairs. Don't drive yourself. Let the driver send you back. Feng Ling nodded and left. When she returned to the Feng family, little Momo was sitting in the small sand pile in the yard, playing with a small toy car. When he heard the sound of a car outside, he did not even look outside. He turned his head and shouted, "Great-grandma, there's a car." There was a servant guarding by the side. When she saw Feng Ling return, she quickly nodded at her. Feng Ling smiled and looked at little Momo. As expected, less than 2 minutes after he shouted, Matriarch Feng rushed out as though she was afraid that the child would be taken away by some random person. When she saw it was Feng Ling, her expression relaxed. You're back so quickly? Feng Ling nodded and walked to little Momo. She leaned in front of the child and bent down to look at him. Little Momo, it's been a few months. Do you still remember Auntie? Little Momo finally lifted his attention from the toy car in his hand. The moment he saw Feng Ling, he was stunned for a moment before he grinned and jumped into her arms. Sister, my little ancestor, your hands are covered in sand. You haven't washed your hands. Seeing that Feng Ling's clothes were instantly dirted, the servant slapped her thigh and cried out. She rushed forward to pull the child away. It's all right. There are clothes at home. I'll change later. Feng Ling picked the little thing up and lowered her head to kiss his face. Chapter 14:10. Did you miss me? Feng Ling carried little Momo into the Feng family's villa. Seeing that Feng Ling had returned, grandfather Feng rushed out to welcome her. Feng Ling was the only granddaughter in the family. Recently, it was all thanks to little Momo's presence that the two elders' attention had been diverted. Otherwise, if Feng Ling wasn't in New York, they would really miss her. Did you accompany Nanheng back to New York to treat his eyes? How has he been recently? Grandfather Feng asked. His body is much better. He's already recovered to 70 to 80% of his previous state. His eyes just came back to find Dr. Yorko for targeted treatment. I don't know what will happen after this treatment, but everything is developing in a good direction. Don't worry. Feng Ling placed little Momo on the sofa and answered warmly. That's good. Elder Feng nodded. In the past, you were always running around the base and doing bloody things. Now that he's recuperating, all of you should live a peaceful and leisurely life. It's good to gradually leave the base and the original circle of fighting and killing. Her sense of mission for the base had long been deeply rooted in her bones. Even if she didn't go back, she couldn't throw these things away. How could she leave that circle? Feng Ling smiled and didn't answer. She rubbed little Momo's head and asked, Who from the Wen family is coming to pick him up? It's Wen Liqing's uncle. A few years ago, something happened to the Wen family. Some of the family members left, some were injured, and some died. There aren't many left, but we don't know much about her uncle. He only said that he heard that Wen Liqing's child was here. He said that he didn't want to trouble us too much and wanted to take the child away. We didn't agree, and he didn't dare to be too rash in the Feng family. However, recently he often came to visit the child and tried to coax Momo away. Momo might have watched his mother being beaten since he was young, but he's very vigilant. He's never willing to let anyone carry him, so he's safe here. Grandmother Feng walked over and said. Hearing that Momo was very vigilant, Feng Ling lowered her head to look at the little thing who was sitting on the sofa and stretching out his soft arms to hold her. She sat down beside him and the little thing took the opportunity to climb back into her arms. He lay in her arms and smelled the fragrance on her body. He obediently stopped moving. I haven't received any news about Wen Liqing recently. I don't know how she is. Since the child has been handed over to me, she can't be taken away by others. Arrange 2 more security guards here and someone must always follow the child. As long as the Feng family is here, the Wen family won't dare to do anything. She patted little Momo's head and whispered in his ear, Be good and stay here. Don't walk around with strangers. Auntie and Andy's grandparents will protect you, understand? Although little Momo was only 2 years old, his EQ and IQ were very high. He first looked at her for a while as though he was slowly understanding what she said. Then he obediently nodded and hugged her neck, refusing to let go. This child is really cute. He's smart and sweet. He calls us great-grandfather and great-grandmother every day, making your grandfather, and I feel like he's our great-grandson. Grandmother Feng looked at little Momo with a sincere and loving smile. If when Liqing comes back and has nowhere to go, let her bring the child to stay with the Feng family. We can be her companions and help her take care of the child. Feng Ling curved her lips. This suggestion was good, but she didn't know where Wen Liqing had gone. Recently there had been no news of Dr. Wen. Yesterday she heard from Qin Shuk that the Wen family had come to New York to look for someone. They seemed to have come to look for Dr. Wen, but there was no news of Dr. Wen. He didn't seem to be in America. It had been a few months. Dr. Wen should have found Wen Liqing, but she didn't know what had happened. He hadn't returned yet. Fortunately the child was with her. If he were to be handed over to someone else, no one would be at ease. So? Is boss going to stay in the hospital with his eyes covered for another 3 to 4 days? In the hospital, Li Nanheng, who had quickly undergone a minor eye surgery, had just been sent to the ward to rest when Feng Ling received a call and heard Kay and the others' complaints. Li Nanheng had yet to wake up because of the anesthesia. Feng Ling had asked Dr. Yorko earlier and said that the surgery was very successful. In addition to the treatment in the past few months, the blood clots that had been affecting his vision had actually been eliminated. There was only a little left that was not easy to absorb, so he directly performed a small surgery. Thankfully there was no need for a craniotomy. He only needed to perform a simple surgery on the surface of his head, neck and eyes. If he recuperated properly in the hospital this time, he should be able to see soon. However, his vision might not be as clear as before. It would be blurry for a period of time, and then he would often do eye training. In a few months he would be fine. Dr. Yorko's words were not ambiguous. Instead, he was very certain that his eyes would recover and that the surgery would be very successful. This made Feng Ling's mood very good. She stood in the corridor of the hospital and had the leisure to listen to Kay's complaints on the phone. After listening to the complaints on the other side of the phone, Feng Ling entered the ward. This ward was specially arranged by Dr. Yorko for Li Nanheng. It could be said that Dr. Qin and Mr. Amo had made an overseas call. The environment was very good. Downstairs was facing the bustling downtown area of New York. The floor was very high and the air outside was not bad. However, because Li Nanheng had just undergone a minor surgery, he could not be exposed to the wind, so the windows were not opened. She went to pour some water and went to the bedside. Although she was in the hospital again this time, he could be discharged in 3 or 4 days. She did not pack anything and planned to stay here for a few days. She had just sat on the edge of the bed to check if the effects of the anesthetic had worn off. In the end, the moment she sat down, her hand was still on the edge of the bed. The man who had been quietly lying on the bed moved his hand over, placed it on the back of her hand and gently held it. "You're awake? Does the wound hurt?" Feng Ling looked at the gauze around his eye. "It's not a knife wound. Dr. Yorko used a very small, minimally invasive surgery. It's a pinhole. There won't be any traces." Li Nanheng's voice was hoarse after he woke up from the anesthesia. He then curved his lips. "After this surgery I'll be able to see it. What kind of appearance do you plan on using to appear in front of me? After all, it's the first time I see you after regaining your sight." Feng Ling seemed to consider it seriously and said seriously, "Shall I cut my hair short to celebrate? I was driving too fast yesterday and my alternate account was blown up. I had no other choice. If you guys are really anxious, you can go to WB and see if there are any sisters who have saved their accounts for me. Today is the last day of the double monthly votes. Those who have monthly votes, please vote for me to soothe my blown-up mood. I'm tearing up." Chapter 14:11. Li Nanheng seemed to have choked on his own saliva because of her words. He coughed twice and raised his hand, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. However, because the anesthetic had just worn off, his body could not move on its own. He only raised it a little before putting it down again. Feng Ling lowered her head and leaned in front of him. Li Nanheng took the opportunity to grab her long hair that had fallen down. His fingers gently wrapped around her hair and he sighed slightly. "It's all good. Even if you really shave your head and appear in front of me, you're still my wife. You can't run away." Feng Ling chuckled and looked at his face. "The surgery has just been done. No matter how small the wound is, it still hurts. Don't move around. I'll stay here and not wander around. Rest well. After the recovery period is over, you can see the light again." What's the probability of seeing it in a few days? Li Nanheng asked. Feng Ling thought for a moment. He said it's a very high probability. He's very sure. No matter how low the probability is, there's still a chance of failure. Li Nanheng still gently held her long hair. If I can't recover after this surgery, I'm afraid in the future. Before Li Nanheng could finish speaking, Feng Ling had already brought the cup to his mouth and placed a straw in the cup. Don't talk so much. Drink some water. Li Nanheng stopped talking. After drinking a few mouthfuls of water, his lips looked much better. Li Nanheng, there aren't so many ifs. When Feng Ling took the cup away, her expression was calm as she said calmly, just like when everyone thought you and Kay were dead, I said you were definitely still alive. Your eyes will also recover. Even if you really have to be blind for the rest of your life, if you dare to push me away like you did at Gorkin Farm and refuse to acknowledge me, you can try. Perhaps sensing the threat in her words, Feng Ling was not a person who would casually speak harshly. However, if he dared to push her away again, even if he didn't push her away, she would not turn back. Even if she died, she would not turn back. Li Nanheng chuckled. Okay, I won't push you away. She gently massaged his arm, which was a little numb from the anesthesia. After thinking for a moment, she said, this weekend I'll accompany Qin Shuk to attend a charity dinner. I might not be able to come back for 2 days. Take good care of yourself in the hospital. I'll be back on Monday. Didn't you already resign? You want to attend a business banquet? Back then, I personally went to discuss the cooperation. The other party is an old man in his 60s. I respect him very much. He used his birthday as an opportunity to hold a charity banquet and invited many people, including me. Although I'm no longer in the phone corporation, they clearly know that I've returned to New York. My name is in the invitation letter. If I don't go, it won't be good for the phone corporation and Qin Shuk. Besides, I should give him some face. Qin Shuk nodded and said, I'm a very important partner 2 years ago. I've always taken good care of the phone corporation. Besides, I should give him some face. It was rare for Feng Ling to speak so much in one breath. Furthermore, she explained the reason why she had to go. She was no longer as lazy as before, no matter what she did, and she was too lazy to look at others. Feng Ling, who had always been unfamiliar with the ways of the world, had now worked hard in the business world. No matter when, she would remember the people who had helped her. Does this old man have any marriageable sons, grandchildren, or nephews? Li Nanheng was silent for a while, deep in thought. A moment later he suddenly asked. Feng Ling subconsciously answered, no, I think he only has a daughter. His daughter is almost 37 or 8 years old. She's still unmarried. She takes good care of me. She's a strong woman in the business world. Hearing this, Li Nanheng's expression relaxed a little. And then let's go. Feng Ling took a look at him and realized what he meant. Was he afraid that someone would send him a love rival? She couldn't help but laugh. It's just that she used to be friends with my grandparents. She knows that my parents got into an accident and I've been homeless for too many years before I finally returned home. She's very kind to me, so she's helped me a lot. It's not what you think. It's best if it's not. If it is, it doesn't matter. Not to mention that I can't see, even if I'm disfigured, you'll still be loyal to me. Those men outside won't have a chance, Li Nanheng said without blushing or panting. Feng Ling held her forehead. 3 days later, on the weekend. In the banquet hall on the first floor of a Royal 7-star hotel in New York, Qin Shuk and Feng Ling walked into the red carpet hall side by side. The two of them had their own companions today and did not bring any other male companions or secretaries. Suddenly, 2 natural beauties walked in at the same time. For a moment, the hall became much livelier, and many single men came forward to greet them. In this world, it's said that women are materialistic, but men are just as realistic. Qin Shuk took the goblet with a smile and clinked glasses with the single men who came to greet her. At the same time, she deliberately turned around and stood in front of Feng Ling to prevent Feng Ling from being too cold and embarrassing. At the same time, she gave Feng Ling a look and the two of them spoke quietly. Although Feng Ling had been in the business world for a few years, when Jean Wan and Little Aid appeared in England, she usually learned from the back. After returning to China, she had Qin Shuk as her companion, so every time there was such an occasion, she didn't have to go up to clink glasses and smile. This kind of thing was really easy for Qin Shuk, this lively little woman, to do. However, only Feng Ling knew that Qin Shuk was the kind of beauty who could talk and laugh on the surface and even dare to talk about one-night stands, but in fact, after the social interaction ended and she turned around, there would definitely be no more smile on her face. She was actually very conservative and calm, so even now in front of others, this Qin Shuk seemed to be a glib-tongued woman who knew more than men, but her private life was actually very clean. Feng Ling also casually picked up the goblet that the waiter brought over. She placed it in her hand and was not in a hurry to drink it. She looked at the men who Qin Shuk deliberately blocked and gave her a, "You really understand me" look. Then the two of them continued to walk in. Qin Shuk smiled at the men who came to greet her from time to time and looked at Feng Ling with a smile. People were indeed very realistic, just as she had said. In the past few years, the Feng Corporation's foundation was on the verge of collapse. Feng Ling and Qin Shuk tried their best to support the Feng Corporation, but everyone could see that they were in a precarious situation. Not only would they not lend a helping hand, but they would also watch coldly from the side. At that time, when the two of them came to attend such a banquet together, they mostly received cold glances. Those eyes were filled with, "Who are these two? Where are they from? I've never heard of them. I don't know them." Chapter 14:12. And now, because the Feng Corporation had taken back Tianming, it had received another $1 billion of financing. It had successfully begun to implement the key projects that had been shelved. Many people in the circle were optimistic about it. Right now, the Feng Corporation was rich in funds, and the company's market value had doubled. It had almost become a dark horse in the circle, and everyone was optimistic about it. Thus, the gazes of these people changed, especially those single men. They found out that although the Feng Corporation was now under Qin Shuk's management, Feng Ling was still the legal heir of the Feng family. She was also the legal representative of the company. Qin Shuk was also a golden bachelor. These two women were still unmarried and should be single. They had long been tempted by them and rubbed their palms together, wanting to hook up with them. Back then, those financing and shelved projects were all prepared when you were still around. In the end, when the company finally started to make a name for itself, you left. Don't think that you can get away with it just because you piled all the credit on me. Look at these people. Their eyes are very sharp. They can tell that you still have the entire Feng family behind you. The two of us are two pieces of fat meat in their eyes. Qin Shuk turned her head to Feng Ling and lowered her voice. Feng Ling smiled lightly. "I'm almost out of this circle. How fat can I be?" "That's different. As long as you don't get married and announce to the world who your man is, these people won't give up," Qin Shuk said as she leaned close to her ear. As Qin Shuk spoke, she leaned close to her ear. "Back then there were some rumors between you and Li Nanheng that reached these people's ears, but after so long they didn't see any splashes. They only thought that the two of you had a temporary marriage and had long separated. Now this group of people even said that they wanted to go to the Feng family to be their son-in-law." Feng Ling raised her brows slightly. "Is that so?" Seeing her calm expression, Qin Shuk knew that every time she told her about all kinds of gossip and interesting things, she would get this kind of response. The topic would always be interrupted. She waved her hand in boredom. "Forget it. It doesn't matter if you announce it to the world or not. Anyway, you only have him in your heart from beginning to end. You won't even look at other men. Why should I worry here?" At this moment, someone came over to greet her. As usual, Qin Shuk blocked them and personally went up to clink glasses with them, leaving Feng Ling to enjoy the peace alone. Feng Ling held the wine glass and turned around. From the corner of her eye, she suddenly caught a glimpse of a familiar figure. As expected, the tall man with a mixed-race face turned around without hesitation the moment he saw her. "Miss Feng." When the man walked over, there was still some surprise in his eyes. Obviously, he really didn't expect to meet her here. He then looked around her and didn't see any male companions or friends. He was even more surprised and asked, "Are you alone?" Feng Ling nodded. "Mr. Ian. The last time they parted was a few years ago in England. This man named Ian had covered the rooftop of their bank building with roses and a candlelight dinner. In the end, such a romantic scene was destroyed by Li Nanheng's helicopter. Although she had clearly rejected him, she did not give him a good explanation before she was taken away from England. Feng Ling was actually a little embarrassed to suddenly meet him here. Especially back then, Li Nanheng had taken her away as though he was snatching a girl away. Mr. Ian had seen that scene with his own eyes. "Me and my cousin." Feng Ling glanced at Qin Shuk, who was dealing with the others behind her. Mr. Ian glanced over and then looked at Feng Ling. He smiled. "It's been a few years since we last met, but you're still so beautiful. Your hair has grown a lot longer. Now it's really waist length. I heard from Jin Wan that you used to keep your hair short when you were in your teens." Feng Ling didn't respond directly but smiled. It's all in the past. The topic had just begun, but Qin Shuk had already keenly noticed that there was a man chatting up Feng Ling. She dealt with the man in front of her and turned to rush over. She stepped forward and pulled Feng Ling's arm, only to see that there was a smile on Feng Ling's face. From what she said, they should know each other. Qin Shuk glanced at Mr. Ian again and asked Feng Ling, "Who is this man?" "When I was studying in England, Mr. Zan's younger brother, named Ian, was the deputy president of the London Bank. I don't know if he's in a higher position now. It's been many years since we last met, so I don't know much about him," Feng Ling answered softly. After understanding the situation, Qin Shuk glanced at him again and then commented in a low voice, "This Mr. Ian likes you." Feng Ling, it had been so many years, and when they met they only greeted each other politely. How could Qin Shuk see through it so easily? Why couldn't she see the emotions in his eyes? "I'm right? In the past he did have some thoughts about me, but he's fine. He won't pester me. It's just a reunion." Hearing this, Qin Shuk gave up on the idea of sending him away. She nodded. "All right, you guys take your time to catch up. I'll go chat with those two boys for a while." "What do you want to talk about?" Feng Ling was surprised. "Those two shameless people secretly spoke dirty words to me. If I don't scold them until they are speechless, I, Qin Shuk, will write my name backwards." With that, Qin Shuk drank all the wine in the glass, put down the glass and turned to walk back. Feng Ling turned back to look at her. Seeing that there were people here, she looked away. Mr. Ian had already approached. Seeing that Feng Ling's expression was a little dazed, his gaze warmed up. "How have you been in the past few years after returning to America?" Feng Ling did not reject this way of reminiscing with old friends. She nodded calmly. "Not bad. When I left England, I didn't have the time to say goodbye to you. I'm really sorry." "Ah, I watched you leave," Mr. Ian said. As he spoke, he deliberately glanced behind her. "Only your cousin came with you? Where's Mr. Li?" Feng Ling glanced at him. Seeing that Feng Ling didn't seem to know how to explain why Li Nanheng didn't come with her, Mr. Ian interrupted her with a gentle smile. "Look at my question. It's not appropriate. Young people, it's normal for relationships to be on and off." Feng Ling, ? Did he mean that she had already broken up with Li Nanheng? Or could it be that he had also heard some gossip in the New York business circle and thought that she was the same as Qin Shuk, a golden single leftover woman? Chapter 14-13. It's rare for Mr. Ian to come to America as a guest. "Are you here to discuss financial cooperation?" Feng Ling asked. "Yes." "Is this your first time in America?" "Not really. I've been here a few times before, but this is my first time in New York." Seeing that Feng Ling would take the initiative to chat, Ian's gaze became much gentler. He looked at her with the same expression as when he was in England. Feng Ling curved her lips and said without changing her expression, "Since it's your first time in New York, you're not familiar with many things here, so it's better not to take the gossip in the New York business circle seriously." "What do you mean?" "I mean the rumors about me among these people." Feng Ling's voice was calm and indifferent. Feng Ling's voice was quiet and indifferent. "Whether it was back in England or now, I've never been single." Before she could finish speaking, there was a sudden commotion outside the banquet hall. Hearing the voice and seeing that the people around seemed to be talking about something, Feng Ling instinctively turned her head. When she glanced at the door of the banquet hall, she saw a familiar figure walking through the crowd. Soon he entered the bright banquet hall from the ink-like night. Today, in order to accompany Qin Shuk, she was wearing a deep V-neck black gown. It was sexy, but it did not expose anything that should not be exposed. When she turned around, she held the hem of the dress with one hand and held a goblet of red wine with the other. Her gaze shifted slightly and landed on that person. The surroundings were still filled with laughter and toasts. Everyone's eyes were filled with extravagance. Feng Ling's gaze landed on the person's eyes. She saw the man's figure clearly and found that he had accurately discovered her direction. His gaze was directed at her and met her eyes across the sea of people. Without hesitation, he strode over from the crowd. When she was sure that his eyes were really looking at her and that his deep eyes were dark and bright, no longer unfocused but focused on her, Feng Ling's heart tightened and then pounded violently. "Mr. Li? Is that CEO Li? It seems like I haven't heard any news about CEO Li for a long time. When did CEO Li come to New York? Do you know about any partners related to the Li Corporation?" "I'm not sure. I haven't heard any news about Mr. Li recently." There were whispers around, but Feng Ling stared at Li Nanheng's eyes and tightened her grip on the goblet countless times. You could see. Today is the weekend. Didn't Dr. Yorko say to discharge you tomorrow? Will he be discharged tonight? Before she could react, the man had already approached with a familiar cold aura. He was still cold and didn't want to look at others. He stepped forward and glanced at her. Why didn't Qin Shuk come with you? Leave you here alone? As soon as he finished speaking, Li Nanheng decisively took off his black suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders, covering all the sexy and fair skin on her V-neck gown that should not be seen by others. At the same time, he held her with his long arms, silently declaring his ownership of her. Oh my God, Li, cousin-in-law, did you specially kill your way here from the hospital? Qin Shuk reacted to what had happened and quickly leaned over. However, because Li Nanheng was here, his aura made her habitually shrink to the side. She did not dare to get too close and only whispered, How could I leave her here alone? I was quarreling with two scumbags just now, okay? The distance between Feng Ling and me is less than 3 meters. Besides, she's so good at martial arts. If anything happens, she'll be the one to protect me. How useful can I be with her? The word cousin-in-law successfully reduced the coldness in Li Nanheng's eyes. He glanced at Qin Shuk as though he was praising her for being sensible. However, Feng Ling was unable to speak for a moment. The people around them were all talking about it. After all, there seemed to be something fishy going on between the second miss of the Feng family and Li Nanheng. It had been rumored in the circle for a while, but no one mentioned it since there was no news. She didn't expect it to be true. Putting on clothes in public and hugging her, it was clear that their relationship had reached a certain level. Furthermore, they were arrogant and calm. There was no need to hide it in public. The moment Ian saw Li Nanheng, a flash of surprise flashed across his eyes. Then he seemed to understand what Feng Ling wanted to say. Although it was a little awkward, fortunately nothing too awkward happened. He only smiled. Mr. Li, nice to meet you. Li Nanheng glanced at him with a fake smile but did not even look him in the eye. He did not reply. He only raised his hand to touch his wife's hair and said in a low voice that only she could hear, Didn't you say you wanted to cut your hair short to help me welcome the new light? In the end, you're dressed so sexily and with long hair fluttering in the wind for other men to see? Feng Ling's eyelids twitched and she glared at him. I just casually wore a gown and Qin Shuk ordered it for me. I just wore it. Casually? It's indeed casual for you to wear so little. I feel like my head is turning green when I'm lying in the hospital. Thankfully I came in time. Otherwise, this Englishman would probably bring you to the rooftop to lay roses. As Li Nanheng spoke, he glanced at the deep V-neck on her chest with disdain and tightened the suit jacket on her body. He wished he could help her button it. Li Nanheng, you can see now and think you're capable, right? Feng Ling wanted to scold him, but she held it in. For a moment, she couldn't care less about the gazes of everyone around her. She stared at his eyes for a long time and saw that there were only tiny needle holes around his eyes. There were indeed no obvious wounds, but because he had just passed the postoperative recovery period, his eyelids looked a little whiter than usual, and his double eyelids looked much bigger after being applied with the medicine. In fact, they were just swollen, but when this man's eyes were swollen, only his double eyelids were a little bigger. Those who didn't know would think that he had just woken up and there was nothing unusual. In addition, he had gained a lot of weight recently, so he was indeed not much different from before. Thus, she paused and continued to stare into his eyes. Can you really see? Li Nanheng glanced at her. I can still see you smiling happily at another man just now. Do you think I should go back to being blind? Feng Ling. Chapter 14:14. Seeing that Feng Ling was clearly being hugged, Mr. Ian was about to say something when Qin Shuk stepped forward. Mr. Ian, my cousin-in-law and cousin often quarrel. Don't you understand our daily lives? Do you know what it means to quarrel? The deeper our relationship becomes? The two of them are like this. This is your first time in New York. What kind of cooperation are you talking about? Come, let's chat for a while. Ian's brows moved. He glanced at Qin Shuk and was dragged away by her. Before Feng Ling's expression changed because of his words, Li Nanheng hugged her even more tightly. He lowered his head and whispered in her ear, I just took off the gauze. My vision is still a little blurry, but it doesn't affect my normal life. The moment I opened my eyes, I rushed over. I planned to support my wife, but when I came in, I saw you standing with that Englishman. Feng Ling immediately rolled her eyes at him. Don't be jealous. I just met him. I was just greeting him. Li Nanheng did not intend to say anything more to Ian. He lowered his head to look at her trembling eyelashes and immediately understood her current emotions. His eyes had just recovered from the postoperative recovery period and he had come over. Li Nanheng, who had regained his light, was not used to facing him. Seeing the hint of embarrassment hidden in her eyes, Li Nanheng pressed his forehead against hers. "When my eyes recover, I'll come to look for you. How about it? Are you touched?" Feng Ling glanced at him and met his eyes. Seeing her reflection in his eyes, her lips moved slightly. Before she could speak, the man suddenly pressed the back of her head and kissed her lips without hesitation. Feng Ling? This was a public place. There were people all around. Was he crazy? Sure enough, in an instant the banquet hall was filled with all kinds of exclamations. The men whistled, the women exclaimed in surprise, and then a burst of applause erupted. Feng Ling couldn't resist in front of everyone. She gripped his shirt tightly and glared at him, warning him not to do this in front of so many people. Li Nanheng, who seemed to have finally received her warning gaze, was very calm. As though there was no one else around, he held her in his arms and turned to leave with her in the crowd. He ignored all the curious questions and exclamations behind him, as well as the people who tried to approach Xiao Li to greet him. Li Nanheng actually took Feng Ling away just like that. Although he did not say anything, this scene was enough to tell all the single men in the New York business circle that Feng Ling belonged to him, Li Nanheng. No one could dream about it. Then, Qin Shuk suddenly saw the gazes gradually directed at her from all directions, and the corners of her mouth twitched fiercely. Ha ha ha. My cousin and Xiao Li have been together for a long time. Isn't this something that everyone in the industry already knows? It's just that the two of them have always been very low-key. Didn't you see that I call him cousin-in-law? We've always been a family. The two of them have been together for many years and have always been very close. Some time ago, the two of them even went to Israel for a trip and brought back a lot of local specialties. I'll bring them back for everyone to share, Qin Shuk explained to everyone while cursing in her heart. Li Nanheng, this scumbag. He actually asked her to help him wipe his ass. He was too arrogant to take Feng Ling away just like that, okay? She still had to stay behind to deal with the aftermath. Why did he have to bully a single dog like her? Feng Ling was brought back to the car by Li Nanheng. At a glance, she saw his car parked outside. The man pushed and shoved her into the car. There was no one else in the car. Clearly he drove here himself. Feng Ling was about to ask him why he drove himself. He didn't even have clear vision and drove here. Did he not know how to cherish his life after being saved? If he couldn't see clearly and got into a car accident, she really couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't be able to live to marry her. In the end, before she could say anything, the man followed her into the back door. After closing the door with a bang, he pushed her heavily inside, pressed her down, and kissed her hard on the lips. Ew. Li Nanheng. Feng Ling was a little dazed by his sudden passionate kiss. She rushed to push him away, but the man's hand held her waist firmly and pressed her hard against the leather seat behind the car. Like a wolf that had been hungry for a long time, he kissed her hard, kissed her, sucked her, and even nibbled her. He kissed her until the oxygen in her lungs was almost squeezed dry. She could only lean weakly against the seat and let him kiss her. Her eyes blinked in the darkness of the car, and she could clearly feel his eagerness. He was eager to hug her, kiss her, and hold her completely in his arms. He was eager to press her against the car and kiss her when he could finally see her again. This kiss lasted for a long time. She could clearly feel the changes in the man's body, but he didn't seem to want to do it with her in the car. He just kept kissing her until her lips were numb and even slightly swollen. He sucked and kissed her rosier lips again and again. When he felt that her body had softened, the man finally stopped kissing her. He held her firmly in his arms, buried his face in her neck and said hoarsely, "So fragrant." No matter how spacious the car was, with a tall man like Li Nanheng squeezing in from the back, it still seemed a little small. In this space, Feng Ling's face was slightly hot. She moved slightly, but she was still imprisoned in his arms. He held her very tightly. At the same time, she felt his breath on the side of her neck. He even used his lips to rub the artery on her neck, as though if she dared to move or struggle out of his arms, he would not hesitate to kiss her neck or bite her. Before Qin Shuk handed this gown to me, she seemed to have placed a bottle of perfume in the closet, causing the smell of perfume to come out of the clothes. Feng Ling's voice was a little hoarse. After being kissed for so long, her voice was no longer as calm and clear as usual. Instead, it was so soft that it made one's blood surge. It's probably the smell of perfume. No, it's the smell of your body. The man kissed her neck. He knew that if he left a hickey here, she would probably ignore him for the entire night, so he reluctantly moved the kiss to the soft flesh under her ear and gently sucked it. Because of the man's action, Feng Ling's entire body trembled. She held back her moan and almost cried out. Her shoulders trembled and her voice was hoarse. Don't. Chapter 14-15. However, because of her hidden moan, the man was really about to boil. His breathing became heavier by her ear. He kissed her earlobe and rubbed her hard in his arms. Don't move. I'll just kiss you for a while. Feng Ling was held in the man's arms. She could clearly feel that his lower body had already reached its limit. Her face was burning and she did not dare to move. She was afraid that if she moved again it would really ignite. It wasn't like this man had never done that to her in the car. I missed you. He kissed her ear, then her hair and finally her neck. His breathing became heavier as he hugged her even tighter. He even sat her on his lap. I really missed you too much. Can you understand what I'm saying? The last word gradually moved upwards, carrying a deeper meaning. Feng Ling leaned in his arms and looked at him. So, the gauze on your eyes has just been removed. You didn't rest in the hospital for another day and directly came over? The man curved his lips and kissed the tip of her nose. What else did you think? Do you have any self-awareness as a patient? It's only been a few days since the surgery. Your body is still. Li Nanheng lowered his head and bit her nagging lips. He called her lips and said hoarsely, Don't you know how my body is? Patient? That was a few months ago. It's just a minor surgery on my eyes. I can be discharged in 3 or 4 days. Do I need to stay at home to recuperate? As he spoke, he kissed her lips again and held her in his arms. He held and kissed her as though she was a treasure and continued to bite her lips. The first thing I did after I could see was to come and see my wife. Am I wrong? All right. You're right. Why don't you bring a pair of glasses out to block the wind? Even if your eyes are completely healed in the future, if you end up crying at the sight of the wind, let's see who can treat you. Feng Ling couldn't be bothered to argue with him. She reached out and searched the car for a long time. She found a pair of sunglasses in the glove compartment and put them on for him. Fortunately, when he came to New York, he also asked someone to drive this car over. This pair of sunglasses was the one he wore when he brought him to the supermarket. Since then, it had been left in the car. It's so late. Should I wear sunglasses? Li Nanheng felt that the sunglasses were a hindrance and raised his hand to take them off. Don't take it off. Your eyes shouldn't be exposed to the wind now. Dr. Yorko said that after you leave the hospital, you have to recuperate well. At least for a month. Seeing that her eyes were much fiercer, Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows and put down his hand. All right, let's go back first. Back to where? Go home. The man lowered his head and rubbed his nose against the tip of her nose. I don't want to smell disinfectant in the hospital ever again. Then promise me that you won't let your eyes get exposed to the wind again. Once your eyes are completely healed, you can say goodbye to the hospital. Feng Ling knew that previously, he had to take medicine and apply medicine every day and had to deal with doctors back and forth. Right now, he really had a shadow of the hospital. All right. He still hugged her without letting go. Then let go of me. I'll go drive. Don't drive anymore. Feng Ling pushed him. Kiss me and let go. Feng Ling looked up at him. The man was wearing a pair of sunglasses in the dark car. No matter how she looked at him, he looked especially silly. She could not be fierce and helplessly raised her head to kiss his chin. Let's do this first. Let me go drive. The man let go of her in satisfaction. All right, let's do this first. We'll continue kissing when we get back. Feng Ling pretended not to hear him. As she retreated from his embrace, she quickly crawled through the gap between the 2 seats in front of her. Her suit jacket was also placed on the passenger seat. The man caught a glimpse of her sitting in the driver's seat in that gown. Seeing that her snow-white arms were exposed to the air, he felt his eyelids twitch. Previously he could not see them and could only touch them every day. Now that he finally saw them again, he felt that no matter if it was this woman's expression or a certain piece of snow-white skin, even if it was just her hand in front of him, it would make him extremely hard. Don't you need to go back to the hospital first? Didn't the doctor say that you'll be discharged tomorrow? Feng Ling started the engine. There's no need. Dr. Yorko personally removed the gauze. He's recovering very well. He can go home directly. Hearing the man's words, Feng Ling did not ask further and drove the car out of the parking lot in front of the hotel. After all, this was New York. There was no apartment for the 2 of them. There was only an apartment near the company that Feng Ling had lived in. The space was quite large. On the way back she put on her Bluetooth earpiece and called Qin Shuk. Knowing that Qin Shuk had already helped to deal with the aftermath, she still felt a little apologetic. After all, it was really difficult to escape from the curious questions of a group of people. Li Nanheng at least owed Qin Shuk a meal. In the future he would definitely treat her well. Otherwise, Qin Shuk would not let the matter go so easily. After returning to the apartment and entering the elevator, Li Nanheng leaned over, pressed her against the elevator and bent down to kiss her. "I didn't starve you a few days ago. Do you have to look like you've been hungry for 800 years? Feng Ling was unable to escape from this man's kiss. She helplessly pushed his shoulder back. The man lowered his head and pecked her lips. "That's different." "What's different?" "Seeing and not seeing are completely different," Li Nanheng said as he pulled her into his arms. As Li Nanheng spoke, he pulled her into his arms again. When the elevator stopped, he brought her out of the elevator. The moment the door opened, Li Nanheng pushed her into the door. He was clearly very anxious. However, after entering the door, Feng Ling had just raised her hand to turn on the lights. Before she could take off her shoes, the man suddenly picked her up by the waist and carried her into the bedroom. She was about to say that it was his first time coming to her apartment in New York and that he was not familiar with the environment here, but he carried her all the way into the bedroom. Feng Ling could not say a word. She could only say that this man's adaptability was really strong. Back then, when he couldn't see in Los Angeles, he instinctively identified the direction. Now that he could see, he did not need to look anywhere else to find her bedroom. "Li Nanheng, you." Feng Ling felt her body suddenly being thrown heavily onto the bed. The man pressed her down and kissed her heavily on the bed without hesitation, as though he wanted to make up for everything he hadn't kissed, touched, or seen in so many months. His heavy breathing brushed against her lips and face. He pulled open the zipper hidden at the waist of her gown and pulled it off without hesitation. Chapter 14-16. Feng Ling found that she really had no strength to resist. Even if she had the strength, as long as she met Li Nanheng's gaze, her entire body would soften. The scene of this man covered in blood at the Gorkin farm was still vivid in her mind. Now he was finally standing in front of her. The wounds on his body had healed and his eyes could be seen. Her heart skipped a beat. While the man was focused on undoing their clothes, she raised her hand and touched the corner of his eyes. She then slowly stroked the corner of his eyes to the space between his brows. She then moved down bit by bit and stroked his eyelids. The man did not say anything. Because of her actions, he pinched her hand and kissed the back of her hand, palm and fingers. This kiss was very hot but also very gentle. In the end, he bit her fingertip and said hoarsely, "Fool, come back to your senses. You're not dreaming." Feng Ling abruptly came back to her senses. Facing his gaze, the man lowered his head and kissed her between her brows. His hands did not stop moving as he removed all the obstacles on their bodies. The moment their skin pressed against each other without any obstacles, Li Nanheng sighed in satisfaction. Throughout the night, Feng Ling's gown had been torn out of shape and thrown to the ground. From time to time, the bed would shake and from time to time, there would be the sound of the man's heavy breathing and the woman's unbearable moans. For 2 consecutive days. Feng Ling couldn't believe it. She had actually been tied to the bed by Li Nanheng for 2 days. After eating he would continue. After showering he would continue. Even when she was so tired that she wanted to carry him to sleep, he would move on his own. After 2 days, no matter how good Feng Ling's stamina was, she was already seeing stars. Several times she wanted to beat him up, but she couldn't beat him. In the end, she didn't know if she had fallen asleep or fainted from exhaustion. In short, she refused to move again. At noon 2 days later, Feng Ling raised her head from under the blanket. Seeing that Li Nanheng was not in the bedroom, she quickly sat up from the bed, only to find that her clothes were not in the bedroom. She could only wrap herself in the blanket and open the closet in the bedroom to find clothes. When she walked out of the bedroom she still felt a little weak. When he went out, he noticed that the light in the living room was a little dim because the lights were not turned on. When he looked outside he saw that it was raining outside. This kind of weather made people lazy, and there was no need for her to go out. She rubbed her messy hair and was about to pour herself a glass of water when she suddenly heard a ding from the kitchen. Then, the tall man walked out of the kitchen, holding a glass of warm milk in his hand. "Come here, have a glass of milk." Feng Ling didn't know how long she had slept, but it must have been more than 10 hours. Right now her stomach was empty and because of the weather she felt a little cold. Glancing at the milk in his hand, she walked over, picked it up and took a sip. It was still a little hot. She moved the glass away a little, wanting to drink it later. At the same time, she looked at the man who was in a particularly good state of mind. His hair was clean and neat and she met his gaze. Li Nanheng, it's indeed worth celebrating that your eyes have recovered, but isn't the way you celebrate too unreasonable? There's still a long way to go. Do you need to spend 2 days to take my life? She complained as she turned around with the glass of milk. However, the moment she turned around, the man smiled and pulled her back into his arms. At the same time, he raised his hand to help her stabilize the glass that almost fell from her hand. He lowered his head and kissed her cheek. I'm proving that I'm not hurt at all. Your man is your man. Whether you can see or not, you can only lie down obediently. Feng Ling's temples throbbed because of his words. She had really given him the cold shoulder for too long in the past. This man's desire to conquer her was always very strong, especially in bed. He definitely did not give her any face like he usually did. It was definitely from the perspective of conquering and being conquered. Feng Ling tilted her head slightly to avoid his kiss, but the man did not let go of her. He kissed her a few more times on the face and in the end he stood there and hugged her. At the same time he kissed her ear. I haven't seen you for a few months. My wife has become prettier again. Feng Ling. Can you not be so sour? Your attitude towards me now is much better than when you were in Washington. The man kissed her hair lightly. Do you know how good I am now? This narcissistic man. Feng Ling turned back to scold him, but the man pressed her back against the wall. He held the back of her neck and gave her another long deep kiss. Feng Ling's heart was alarmed. Afraid that he would throw her back on the bed again, she quickly struggled to say, The milk is going to be cold. Feng Ling's eyes widened. The man finally let go of her and touched the cup in her hand. It's still a little hot. Drink slowly. Feng Ling answered blankly and quickly retreated from his arms. She stood by the side and drank the milk. In the past, she didn't like to drink this, but after returning to the Feng family, the servants always asked her to drink a cup before and after bed. Later she gradually got used to it. Now she would drink it occasionally. When Li Nanheng couldn't see, he would occasionally ask her to drink more milk. Right now she didn't really dislike the taste of milk. Instead she quite liked it. After finishing the cup of milk, she looked at the empty cup in her hand and asked, You can see now. Do the elders of the Li family know about this? I haven't informed them yet. If they find out now, they'll probably tie the two of us back to get married and have children in 24 hours. Feng Ling, I really want to get married on the spot, but I can't make you feel wronged. We have to find a good place and have a grand wedding. You've been wronged enough since you were young. I don't want to give you such a big regret when you get married. As the man spoke, he reached over and rubbed her hair. He glanced at her. Long hair is really different from short hair. What's the difference? Before Feng Ling could recover from the grand wedding he mentioned, she was attracted by his words again. When your hair was short, it felt very obedient. I always wanted to hold you in my arms, kiss you, hug you and coax you. He touched her hair again and then looked meaningfully at the remaining milk stains on her lips. He said, When I touch your long hair, I really want to throw you back on the bed and have another 2 days and 2 nights. Hit me gently. Li Nanheng, who was suddenly slapped down by Feng Ling, turned green. I'm still an injured patient. Why are you so heavy-handed? Feng Ling expressionlessly placed the milk cup on the coffee table. Injured? Go wash the cup. Chapter 14-17. Li Nanheng walked back with the empty milk cup. After washing the cup clean, he walked out and saw Feng Ling standing in front of the window. Outside the window it was raining and thunder was rumbling, but inside the window, it was as warm as spring. To him, it had been too long since he last saw her. He missed her so much. 2 days and 2 nights was not his limit. If it weren't for the fact that she really couldn't take it anymore, he probably wouldn't have left the bed. But just by looking at her back, Li Nanheng felt that what he said when he touched her hair was not a lie. He really wanted to throw her back onto the bed. It was rare for her to recover from a serious illness, and it was rare for her to see. Li Nanheng walked over and pulled her into his arms. He lowered his head and kissed her ear. What's wrong? You're busy taking care of me every day. Are you used to it? Now that you suddenly don't have to do so many things, are you not used to it? No, I just want to sleep now. Feng Ling's waist and legs were still sore, and the weather outside was not suitable for going out. Looking at the heavy rain outside, the raindrops kept hitting the window. It was as though they had once struggled step by step in the rain of bullets and finally reached a life where they could safely stay behind the window. This inexplicable peace of mind, as well as the sudden hug from the man behind her, gradually softened Feng Ling's heart. Feeling the softness of the woman in his arms, Li Nanheng kissed her ear and then her cheek. He turned her around bit by bit, from her eyebrows to the tip of her nose, to the corner of her lips and then to her chin. He kissed her neck and whispered, "I can see your eyes now. I can see all your expressions." His words were actually referring to something. This was because Feng Ling's current state of mind was completely different from before she went to Israel to look for him. At that time she often kept a straight face and was too lazy to talk to him. She kept a distance from him. Even if they had a one-night stand in the resort, she would still choose to look at him coldly the next day. She would get into the car and leave without looking back. But now she had worked so hard to find him and had stayed by his side for several months. It had been at least 4 months if not half a year. She was no longer the Feng Ling who was used to putting on a cold face in front of him. She was made of flesh and blood, and he was in her heart. Although Li Nanheng did not mention anything about the Gorkin farm in the past few months, he did feel guilty. At that time it was also a downpour. That rainy night she guarded outside for a long time. He refused to see her, but she did not leave. Her entire body was drenched before she was called in by Dr. Mona and Carrie. At that time, even though she had changed her clothes, when she carefully held his hand by his bed, her hand was still very cold. She did not catch a cold on the spot. She could only say that her good health was good. "I'll go take a shower first. I haven't after I woke." "I haven't. Since I woke," Feng said. Feng has. She really can't hold on any longer. This weather was suitable for doing what she loved to do at home. They couldn't go anywhere. Right now there was nothing urgent in New York that required them to go out. Right now she was like a fish on the chopping board. She was at his mercy and had no reason to resist. As soon as she finished speaking, she pushed him away and rushed back to the bedroom. In fact, when she was asleep, Li Nanheng was used to washing or wiping her body, so her body was very clean. However, it was more comfortable to wash herself. She had just taken off her clothes, walked into the bathroom and turned on the shower. Before she could adjust the temperature of the water to the most suitable level, the sound of the door opening came from the bedroom. Feng Ling paused and casually adjusted the water temperature. At this moment, the bathroom door was opened. Feng Ling was startled. She watched as the man walked into the bathroom and began to take off his clothes. She could clearly feel the desire in the man's eyes. Her heart immediately skipped a beat. She wanted to turn off the water and escape, but the tall man was standing at the bathroom door. She couldn't even stretch out a foot. The scene of being tormented by this man for 2 consecutive days until her throat was hoarse was still vivid in her mind. Feng Ling's throat instantly became a little dry and hoarse. "You should know your limits. If this continues, I'm afraid I'll die in less than a month." As soon as she finished speaking, Li Nanheng had already removed the restraints on his body and walked toward her. Feng Ling held the shower in her hand and subconsciously took a step back. She decisively refused. No. He didn't let her rest for 2 consecutive days. It wasn't easy for her to wake up. How could Feng Ling let Li Nanheng fulfill his wish so quickly? However, Li Nanheng was clearly in high spirits. After entering, he closed the door behind him and pressed toward Feng Ling, who was already in the corner of the bathroom. Feng Ling was about to spray him away with the showerhead when the man grabbed her wrist. Her back was instantly pressed against the cold tile wall. The coldness caused her body to shiver, and her grip on the showerhead tightened. Li Nanheng slowly took the shower from his hand and hung it back up. He then attentively adjusted the water's stability. In a moment, the warm mist dyed the space in front of them. The surroundings were filled with white mist, perfectly enveloping the two of them. The atmosphere became even more hazy and even charming. Feeling that Li Nanheng was unreasonably sticking to her, Feng Ling made a final struggle. "Let me rest for a day first or wait until it's dark. I just want to take a shower and rest." She felt that her physical strength really couldn't compare to his. Right now, this man was completely different from when he had just returned from Israel. He had completely recovered his beast nature. Li Nanheng kissed the corner of her lips. "Next time you can shower after I fall asleep. Otherwise, I'll want to come in when I hear the sound of water." Chapter 14:18. Feng Ling felt the water droplets flowing down her collarbone. The man's kiss also moved down, and her entire body could not help but tremble. Li Nanheng's hand groped around her waist and abdomen, then he held her face again. Under the shower, he gently bit her lips and kissed her beautiful chin and snow-white neck, leaving a crimson mark on the way down. Feng Ling swallowed back the voice that had surged to her throat. She supported herself against the wall with one hand so that she could stand more steadily and prevent herself from suddenly falling down in a daze. Li Nanheng took this opportunity to lift her up and hold her around his waist. Feng Ling mumbled, "Not here." However, Li Nanheng leaned closer and continued to bite her lips, kissing her moist and tender lips until they turned even redder. He was ready to move and rubbed against her. Feng Ling was really speechless from his actions. "Slow down." Li Nanheng felt that it was not enough and turned her over. After an unknown period of time, Feng Ling's expression was filled with extreme pleasure and pain, and her eyes became unfocused. "Boss, let go of me, can't I?" In the last moment, Feng Ling really felt that she was going to die here. After a long while, she still hadn't returned to her senses. Li Nanheng held her in his arms, and in this posture, he squeezed some shampoo and directly applied it to Feng Ling's head. Right now, Feng Ling was completely powerless. She had long been pressed into the bathtub by the side. She leaned against it and weakly allowed him to wash her hair and then her body. As the man washed, he kissed her again. She raised her eyes to look at him in shock. She was really too tired. However, Li Nanheng took his time. As if very patiently washing her, he also washed himself, and then carried her out of the bathroom and placed her on the bed in the bedroom. At this time it was still pouring outside. Taking advantage of Feng Ling's distraction, Li Nanheng pulled away her towel and pressed it against Feng Ling again. Under Feng Ling's hateful gaze, Li Nanheng lowered his head and kissed her, saying gently and hoarsely, "I love you, Feng Ling." In the end, Feng Ling did not know when she lost consciousness. She only vaguely felt the bed beside her rise and fall. The man came over to help her wipe her body, then lifted her leg to wipe again and kissed her forehead. Feng Ling couldn't take it anymore. She closed her eyes and fell into darkness. The next day in the morning, Dr. Yorko, who rarely visited private homes, called to ask for the address. He then drove over personally for the routine examination that Li Nanheng had done every 3 days after he was discharged. The weather outside was not bad today. It wasn't easy for Feng Ling to sleep for a long time. After waking up, she opened the door for Dr. Yorko, packed up, and left. "Where are you going?" Seeing that she was about to go out, Li Nanheng, who had just been helped by Dr. Yorko to sit upright on the sofa, shifted his gaze in her direction. "This is New York after all. The Feng family is here. I'm going home to visit the 2 elders. Is there a problem?" Feng Ling had been bullied by this man for the past 2 to 3 days. It was rare for an outsider to be around, so it wasn't good for her to put on a cold expression. However, for the time being, she was unwilling to pay attention to this beast. Her voice was indifferent. "And go ahead. Help me bring a good word." Li Nanheng gave her a look. Feng Ling pretended not to receive his gaze and turned to leave. Her original intention was to return to the Feng family. After all, Li Nanheng's eyes had recovered and he didn't need to stay in New York for too long. He would probably return to Los Angeles soon. Although the Feng family had an old residence in Los Angeles, she still had to ask the 2 elders if they wanted to stay in New York or return to Los Angeles with her. However, Feng Ling felt that they were old and not suitable for trouble, so she had to consider many aspects for them. She also needed to go home to discuss. On the way back to the Feng family, Feng Ling's phone suddenly rang. She glanced at the number on the screen and picked it up. "Grandma, Feng Ling, where are you now?" For some reason, Grandmother Feng's voice seemed to be very low on the other end of the phone. She spoke carefully. Feng Ling instantly sensed that something was wrong. She immediately slowed down and focused on the voice on the other end of the phone. "I'm on my way back to the Feng family." "What happened?" Grandmother Feng whispered nervously. "The old helper and I brought little Momo out to play. We had just arrived near the amusement park when we felt a car following us. Now that we've entered the amusement park, I do feel 2 people following us after getting out of the car." Feng Ling quickly searched the car for the nearest amusement park to the Feng family. She drove into the fork, turned the car around, and continued driving in another direction. She sped up and held her phone in her other hand. Her voice was calm and steady. "Do you know who the other party is coming for? The old helper and I are 2 terrible old ladies. How could we be followed? They should be coming for the child." Hearing that Feng Ling's voice was calm, Grandmother Feng, who was originally a little afraid and nervous, suddenly quietened down. She said softly, "I'm afraid that I don't have any abilities. If those people come to snatch the child, the 2 of us might not be able to protect him. I'll be right there." Feng Ling saw that the navigation showed that they were about 5 kilometers away from the amusement park. 10 minutes. Find a place with many people and wait for me. Don't look back. Don't let them notice anything. Just pretend that you don't know anything. All right, then be careful. What if these people are not to be trifled with? Don't worry, I'm not to be trifled with. With that, Feng Ling hung up the phone expressionlessly. She increased the speed of the car and rushed toward the direction shown by the navigation like an arrow released from the bow. When they arrived at the amusement park, it had only been 10 minutes. Feng Ling parked the car and looked down at her phone. There was still a message from her grandmother a minute ago, saying that the child was still by their side and was safe. She then sent another message saying that they were under a white castle and there were many people there. Chapter 14:19. As expected, old Madame Feng and the old servant pulled little Momo to the place with the most people. The two of them squatted down from time to time to tease the child and did not look around to show any nervousness. Thankfully they cooperated well. Feng Ling walked over with relief. When she passed by them, she did not stop but slowed down her footsteps. As though she was passing by a stranger, she whispered, "Follow me to the Ferris wheel. Pretend not to know me. The two people following me shouldn't be very professional and don't know me." Hearing her words, old Madame Feng and the old servant did not reply. They followed Feng Ling's request and walked over. Feng Ling kept a distance from them, but her eyes were focused on them. When old Madame Feng brought little Momo onto the Ferris wheel began to move as the number of people gradually increased. The one they were sitting in gradually rose into the air. At this moment, she turned to the other side as though she was just an ordinary tourist passing by. She did not stop at all. All of a sudden, she bent down and tied the shoelaces of her white sneakers. From the corner of her eye, she saw a tall and burly man wearing a black hat staring at the rising room on the Ferris wheel. It was the room little Momo was in. At the same time, Feng Ling glanced at a tall and thin man beside him. He was dressed similarly, but the man was holding a baseball bat from somewhere. In such an amusement park, a baseball bat was not strange. He tapped his palm back and forth and stared in the direction of the Ferris wheel, seemingly a little impatient. Feng Ling stood up again. At this moment her phone rang. She picked it up and Li Nanheng's voice came from the phone. "Where?" "The nearest amusement park to the Feng family's villa is near Odin Street," Feng Ling said softly into the phone. The man, who was nibbling on a banana in the apartment, heard her calmly report the location and his expression immediately turned solemn. "What happened?" "Little Momo is being followed. It's not convenient for me to say more. I'll hang up first." Feng Ling quickly hung up the phone. When she turned back, she suddenly saw that one of the men had turned his face in her direction. He seemed to have recognized her and was suspicious of her. After all, the people who came here were either couples or children. She had been alone from beginning to end. Feng Ling's gaze met his again through the crowd. She seemed to understand something at the same time. In the next second, Feng Ling chose to move away from the Ferris wheel area. She abruptly turned and deliberately ran toward a clear lake in the middle of the amusement park. The two men subconsciously raised their feet and chased after her. Clearly they were afraid that she would go to the police or ruin their business and wanted to subdue her first. At the same time, in Feng Ling's private apartment in New York, Li Nanheng glanced at the sky outside, put on the black t-shirt that he had called the mall to deliver, picked up the electronic car key and walked out. As soon as he arrived outside, he saw Qin Shuk walking out of the elevator with a basket of fruits. He bumped into her head-on. Qin Shuk was shocked and glared at him. "Li, ahem, cousin-in-law, where are you going?" Li Nanheng glanced at her and then at the open door. "You came at the right time. Look after the house. I'm going out for a while." Qin Shuk. What the hell? She had just sneaked over to comfort her dear little cousin and to see how Li Nanheng's eyes were. Why did he ask her to stay behind to look after the house when she had just arrived? Can't this door be locked? Why should I look at the house? I don't know the password. What if I come back immediately and can't enter the door? Li Nanheng answered indifferently. He had already taken a step forward and entered the elevator. Qin Shuk. She didn't understand. However, seeing that the elevator door was closed and Li Nanheng's cold and serious expression was cut off, she hesitated for a moment. Although she was unwilling, she still moved to the door and walked in. Looking at the apartment that was filled with Li Nanheng and Feng Ling's aura, she let out a long sigh. Feng Ling's phone could not be reached. Grandmother Feng and the old helper had already started their second lap on the Ferris wheel with the child. They were very obedient to Feng Ling and did not go down. However, after so long they did not receive Feng Ling's call. They could only call her but they could not get through. The old lady looked out of the window of the Ferris wheel. Now that their position had risen again, they could see far away, but she could not see Feng Ling among so many people. Grandmother Feng frowned worriedly and called her again. This time the call connected. However, after ringing for a long time it was finally picked up. Hello. How is it? Have you shaken off those people who are following you? No, they're still following me. I've led them to the east side of the amusement park, but I saw that there should be someone in the car parked outside. Don't go down yet and don't leave alone. Wait for my news. What? There's actually someone else? Grandmother Feng was taken aback. What are these people doing? This is just a child. The child's parents aren't by his side. How can he be followed? Feng Ling did not answer immediately. Not knowing what had happened, she hung up. After the one family's accident, no one knew what had happened inside and outside. The rich businessman that Wen Liqing later married also had a problem. Feng Ling did not know what these people wanted from little Momo, but at least if these people really took the child away, little Momo would definitely be scared out of his wits. Such a young child could not be easily taken away and used. Feng Ling put her phone back into her pocket and looked forward. On the east side of the amusement park, there was a row of tall walls. Inside the walls, there was a row of stained glass with various children's drawings. The glass reflected the figures of the two men who were chasing after her. They were following so closely. It seemed like they recognized her. Did these people not know where she used to be? Did they not know enough about the Feng family's internal affairs? Or were they confident enough to defeat her and plan to make a move? In front of her was the end. There was a crowd, and behind her was a lake that she had just bypassed. Feng Ling looked at the direction in front of her and glanced at it. She quickly walked into the cobblestone path. Her footsteps were fast but smooth, making it difficult for the two tall and strong men to chase after her. Feng Ling did not stop at all. She walked into the small forest in the depths of the cobblestone path. At the same time, she untied the clothes around her waist and put them back on. As she walked, she gently moved her wrists and continued forward with a burning gaze. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.